grocery store to buy some peas and carrots. But when I saw the prices there, well, my mind could hardly bear it. I was told we must accept all this inflation stuff they're spewing. Seems they're trying to drive us all right to the brink of ruin. The produce looked okay, I guess. Don't know what farm it's made on, who planted it, how it grew, what chemicals they sprayed on. Well, it really got me thinking I should grow this on my own. Got a garden plot, maybe not a lot, but it's right there at my home. From seed to spoon, gonna grow my food myself. I'd rather pick it from the ground than pick it from a grocery shelf. I'm gonna work the soil, my toil will pay off soon. I'll eat what I've grown from what I've sown, seed to spoon. Well, the corn is looking great. We've got zucchini and potatoes. I can't wait to taste a burger topped with our tomatoes. Most everything we need can be grown in our backyards. It might take a little elbow grease, but it's really not that hard. From seed to spoon, I'm gonna grow my food myself. I'd rather pick it from the ground than pick it from a grocery shelf. I'm gonna work the soil, my toil will pay off soon. I'll eat what I've grown from what I've sown, seed to spoon.
Test, 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 testing 1, 2. Good morning, everyone. Are you staying warm? Last evening we had heavy rain 10 miles from here, no rain here. We'll pray we can keep that. My name is John Miller. I'm with Superb Canning. Some of you, I see some faces I've seen before. I see a lot of new faces and faces I've probably seen that I've forgotten, but welcome. So we're going to start with about a 10-minute delay. We have a backup coming in, and so we're going to put some more music on and give people a chance to get here, and then the whole program is just going to get delayed about 10 minutes, or we'll make up a little bit of time. So I apologize for that. There are a lot of moving parts here. We've got 1,000 people coming in this morning, and it takes a lot of logistics to make that happen. So I will tease out what we will announce later this morning because we have a little bit of time to burn. Thanks to Ken McCaw and a lot of talented people, we actually have a new album we're going to release here called Heading Home. It was written specifically for this event. You'll be able to buy it later. But we're going to put some of that music on in the meantime. So give us about 10 minutes, and we'll get the show on the road.
Been working in the city, but my day is done. Gonna hit the road like a man on the run. Head to the place that I truly love. Grass on the ground and trees above. That job in the city might pay the bills, but the rat race there still gives me chills. A country life is the one for me. Getting back to the land with my family. Don't get me wrong, I'm a thankful man, but at times I just don't understand why men want to live in a sardine can. I'm off to the place that we love to share. My wife and my kids are waiting there. We're simplifying that part of the plan. Teaching our kids how to love the land. The world might say we've lost our minds, and we'll just leave the world behind. Don't get me wrong, we have our days, but we love this life, and we're here to stay.
Oh, I can't I? Yes, I can. I can, can't I? Yes, I can. Superb lids really seal, and that blue ring makes me feel like I can. Yes, I can. Canning used to be a ball, then it wasn't fun at all. But we're back on the track once again. And now there's nothing that can top when I hear those lids go. I can, yes I can, I can.
Oh, I can, can't I? Yes, I can. I can't I? Yes, I can. Super lids really seal, and that blue ring makes me feel like I can. Yes, I can, I can.
Is there any better feeling than to hear a jar lid sealing over food that you grew yourself? I'm so glad we've left behind days when lids were hard to find, 'cause now Superb turns them out by the shelf.
Oh, I can, can't I? Yes, I can. I can, can't I? Yes, I can. Super lids really seal, and that blue ring makes me feel like I can. Yes, I can.
Oh, I know I really can. I can, yes I can.
I can.
I went down to the grocery store to buy some peas and carrots. But when
Good morning. So we're starting with a 10-minute delay this morning. We got a little bit of things backed up, but you're here. I appreciate it. It's coming out this morning. My name is John Miller. I'm with Superb Canning. Test. Technology. Can't live with it. You can't live without it, right? So Superb Canning and Berlin Seeds are the co-hosts of this event. This is our third year. Some of you have been here before. I want to also thank all the sponsors that are out there to make this possible. We've got 1,000 people coming in this morning, and I understand there's a little bit of a line, so that's why we delayed a little bit, because we want everybody to be able to fully participate. The most important book you have is right in your laps. How many of you got the Summit Guide? Everybody should have a Summit Guide. There are so many things going on that I cannot possibly highlight everything. So please take a look at this book. A lot of work went into it, and it gives you all the details of the workshops. We've got somewhere between 70 and 100 demonstrations going on. I just want to point out a couple of things. You look on the front, it's seed to spoon, right? And then on the back, this is not highly publicized. We have this evening a summit social with barbecued chicken. How does that sound? Oh, I can't hear you. All right. So last year when we finished, we got feedback, and one of the things that bubbled to the top was the fact that you wanted more time to intermingle with people of like mind, people that homestead, garden, all the types of things we do. So if you look back at the tent, we have 12 influencers that are going to be here tonight. Some of them will be on stage this morning, but this evening you'll just be able to mingle with them, eat barbecue chicken. That's from 6 to 9. That's why we put it right on the back, because we kind of pushed that in at the last minute and it wasn't widely publicized. Okay, so we'll see if this works. It's not working. Okay, we'll see if we can get it to work. Okay, like I mentioned before, my name is John Miller. I'm with Superb Canning. My friend Marcus and I started this 3 years ago. I'd like to show you a couple of pictures here and just give you a couple tips on how to make the most of what you're going to be seeing here and life in general. Look at that thing. What do we see? We see a flower, and her situation wasn't the best because she's growing up through, looks like pavers, and it's just a little crack, but that did not prevent this plant from growing, and it didn't prevent her from displaying a beautiful bloom. So here's the mindset I want you to bring to this summit. There are a lot of obstacles. All of us face obstacles, but they're really just opportunities in disguise. So here are 3 things you can do to overcome obstacles. And we made obstacles and removing them and getting around them, getting over them, the theme of this conference from the exhibitor perspective. We've got 100 people here that are going to show you how to overcome obstacles. The first thing you want to do is to look for the crack. That's what that plant did. She found a crack, grew up through it, and then you need to, here's the pragmatic part. You need to understand the limitations. And I'll summarize this all in a statement at the end. You know, not everybody can do everything, but you can do what you can do. So do what you can do. That's understanding your limitations. And then finally, grow through it. You know, we all have challenges. 3 weeks ago, I was in an intensive care unit at a hospital in Germany. I'm here, thank God. It's the only place I know that knows how to eradicate Lyme's, and they did just that for me. If you have Lyme's or know somebody that does, see me backstage and I'll tell you my experience. But 3 weeks ago, I was in an intensive care unit, and I'm here. I said if I make it through 3 hot days with all the stress of this, I'm cured. Okay, here's your takeaway. This is the modus operandi of the Food Summit. Remember this, write this down. Do all you can with what you have, where you are at. That is how things get done, because most people want to do stuff they can for opportunities that haven't presented themselves, but like the flower up on the screen, find your crack, understand your limitations, and grow through it. So, first man up is a man that really doesn't need an introduction to the homesteading community. He's known as the grandfather of homesteading, Mr. Joel Salatin. But here, I want to just give you one thing you might not know about Joel Salatin. He's also a songwriter. Did you know that? I'm going to play a clip of a song he wrote this year for this event, and it was set to music and produced by Ken McCaw. He's running around here somewhere. So please welcome to the stage Mr. Joel Salatin.
Milking the cow, slopping the sow, what a life we've come to now. Don't like what I see in the city. Crime seems prime, what a pity. Looking at street lights and cars, wishing for new sights and stars. So I'm heading for clover and trees, taking my sweet lover with me. Well, whippoorwills call and do no harm, and peace abides on the farm. Together let's build a homestead where cows and pigs are all well fed, warm in hands by a wood stove fire. What could give us more desire? Children playing with the chickens, homemade meals from pickings, in the garden compost grown, saving our seeds hand sown, feeding our family
Welcome to the third annual Food Independence Summit. It's great to be here and great to share with you again. Lots of improvements I'm seeing. You know, in innovation, it usually takes, people ask me, when did you and Teresa know that you were going to make it? I said 3 years. 3 years we were okay. We're going to make it. And if you study the diffusion of innovation and Peter Drucker and those great business books about innovation, somewhere between 3 and 5 years, you enter at this level and then you go down and it's all problems, and then you start solving them and it comes up, and somewhere between 3 and 5 years, you start to breathe. And so this is 3 years here, and I can just feel the efficiency and the redesign. And it's great to be here on the third year. So this morning, I want to take us on a little journey of imagination. Okay? So imagine it's 500 years ago, and you're a frog on the edge of a beaver pond somewhere in, well, it's not Ohio yet, obviously, but somewhere here. There's a beaver pond, and you're a frog on the edge of that pond. What would you know about the world if you were a frog on the edge of a beaver pond 500 years ago? That's the journey I want to take us on this morning. I think sometimes we, especially as adults, we don't allow ourselves to just free flow our imagination. We kind of lose that at 5 years old, and so I've pushed to try to recreate some of that imagination, and I think we can learn a lot if we just let ourselves think through what that would be. We can learn a lot from such an exercise. So these are from a frog's perspective, 500 years ago on the edge of a beaver pond. What would I know about the world, about ecology, about energy, all sorts of things? So the first thing I would know is, I'm sitting there, there is no animal-less ecosystem. I'm watching deer come to the pond. I'm watching the beavers run around. I'm watching the spiders skitter across the top of the pond, salamanders, newts. I'm watching all these animals come. When Lewis and Clark took their expedition out through to the Northwest Corridor in 12, they said that they could not go a mile without encountering a bear. Imagine how many bears there were if every mile you went, you ran into a bear. There is no animal-less ecosystem. Well, so what's the reason for animals? One of the reasons for animals is to move fertility against gravity. Before machines, the only way the fertility that gravitationally moved to the valleys could get back up on a hillside was if a bird or a deer or a bison or an elk went and ate that, and then they would go up the top of the hill to lounge, and when they lounged, they pooped, or the bird sat on the tree and pooped. That was the way nature had, that's the way God designed it, to move fertility that gravitationally moved. The twigs, the minerals, everything headed downhill. So the fertile valleys is where stuff grazed, and then they went, and why did they go up on top of the hills? To chew their cud? Well, because of predators. You get up on top of a hill, and you can look out and you can see where the coyotes and the wolves and things are. There were 2 million wolves in the U.S., in what we call the U.S. today at that time. 2 million wolves, and they each needed 20 pounds of meat a day. That's a lot of meat, 40 million pounds of meat a day consumed just by the wolves. So this is a fantastic way that God set up the predator-prey relationship to move fertility from lower areas to upper areas. So as we have animals, one of the critical facets today is that animals allow us to concentrate fertility and move fertility where it needs to be. In fact, when the Crusades went through France and through Normandy on their way to the Crusades in the 14 and 1500s. They recorded in their records that they constantly ran into farmers who were stall-feeding cattle. In the parable of the prodigal son, the stall-fed calf was not grain-fed; it was green chop. People would go out and they'd side their grasses and bring it in on an ox cart, carry the manure out. So there were these extremely fertile 1 acre, 2 acre spots around the home called curtilage, around the curtilage that were heavily fertilized by the concentrated animal manure. So moving fertility around is critical. Pruning, okay? You know, the fastest way to build soil is with grass, not trees and not bushes. Now, I don't dislike bushes, I don't dislike trees, but all the rich soils on the planet are not found under forests, and they're not found under bushes. They're found under prairie grasslands that are pruned continually in a strategic way, rest and disturbance by herbivorous animals. And think about another reason for animals. So the pruning keeps things, you know, freshened up and metabolizing in juvenile growth spurt. Another reason is, think about, how many of you have ever made a compost pile? Ever made a compost pile? Yeah, lots of us. Okay. Well, you know, a compost pile can be kind of finicky. You know, if you get it too wet, it stinks. If you get it too dry, it just sits there. If you don't have enough carbon, don't have enough nitrogen, you know, it can be kind of finicky. But think about when an animal eats biomass, it decomposes in 24 hours what we take 6 months to do. And the temperature's always right, the moisture's always right, the microbes are always right, all the balance is perfect, and a cow takes that biomass and turns it into a concentrated high fertility form in 24 hours that we kind of struggle with sometimes because composting is a little bit difficult. Isn't that cool? So think about an animal as a very, very rapid compost pile. And real-time energy for those using livestock as you know, motive power. So, number one, there's no animalless ecosystem. So this whole notion that we can farm without animals, or we can have a farm without animals, I don't think you can have a farm without animals. I'm sorry, those of you here who are just corn and soybean growers, and no, you can't have an authentic farm without animals. That's what closes the ecosystem loop. Number two, I'm a frog sitting on the edge of the pond. What else do I notice? Well, energy comes, everything is being driven from proximate energy sources. It's not coming from oil drilled in Saudi Arabia. Okay? The energy that's driving the system is proximate. We have energy from water. You know, a stream maybe is coming into the beaver pond. So there's the force of water. There's, of course, the force of wind. There's, of course, the power of the sun, which includes biomass, trees that can be burned. The point is that energy is not being piped in from far away. Energy is being created from on-site proximity. I remember very well having a discussion with Woody Tash. He started the alternative investment outfit, Sound Money, and he was an investor in New York, and he had a place on Martha's Vineyard, a very ritzy place out on the coast of Massachusetts. And he said that if every home in America that was tied to the grid instead bought a Honda generator, that we would actually save energy by every home having a Honda generator over the grid system. Why? Because so much power is lost just in thousands of miles of transmission lines. I know when you drive out through Montana and Idaho, every time I drive out through there, I think, my goodness, how do they possibly make this thing run? You know, they've got miles of poles out to a lonely ranch house. It's amazing, but there's a lot of loss in power coming from far sources. Number 3, carbon doesn't move very far. Carbon does not move very far. Think about the way nature works. In the fall, the deciduous trees, leaves fall. Maybe pine needles fall. Okay, so there's things falling, but they don't blow very far. They don't blow across the continent. They blow a few hundred yards and pile up against, a fence line, a tree line, or something like that. Leaves don't blow very far. Grass doesn't go. If grass or weeds or things get up and get lignified and mature and fall over and lodge, they don't blow anywhere. They just go on site. Manure. Animals don't travel very far. From the time that forage or those seeds or whatever were eaten until they're pooped out, not very far. As far as a bird can fly in a couple hours, as far as a bison can walk in an hour, it's not very far. So what we want is a farming system that uses carbon in situ and doesn't move it very far. What we want is a recycling. We want a true carbon economy, which means our carbon doesn't get exported. That's critical because that closes the loop. Number 4, hydration occurs on site. All right? Hydration occurs on site. Water determines carrying capacity. Production is tied to water. So, on site, we have these beavers, we have this vegetation around the pond. The pond, it indicates nested water, and so the pond indicates retention rather than drainage. One of the problems in the U.S. that we still have, a problem in our United States DNA, is that we were settled by largely temperate area cultures, Germany, British, Scotland, and there, water is primarily a drainage issue, not a hydration issue. But in 90% of the world, water is primarily a hydration issue, not a drainage issue. And we still have this problem in policy today. And so, for example, all these, every time a road or a highway or interstate goes over a valley, they put the culvert down in the bottom of the valley and then pile dirt up over it so the road can go over. Are you with me? What we need to be doing, what we do on our farm is whenever we build a lane or a road across a thing like this, is we put the dirt in, make the fill, and then we put the pipe in the top of the fill instead of the bottom. Now you have the same road going across, but now you have a pond on the uphill side. 500 years ago, North America was 8% water. 8% water. We know that now. Now we are less than 4% water. That water was from beaver dams. And if you can imagine doubling plus the amount of surface water in the U.S. today, imagine what that would do to evapotranspiration, to hydration, to base flow, to springs. Louis Bromfield, one of our great iconic gurus of our whole movement, writing, Malabar Farm. How many of you know about Louis Bromfield, Malabar Farm? Yeah, up around Worcester. Okay, I was born in Worcester, by the way, so every time I come to Ohio, I have this kind of primal thing. Of course, I was only here 6 weeks, so it wasn't very long. But he always said, that you can't control water downstream. You can't control water on the Mississippi and the Ohio River. What you need are millions and millions of little swimming pool-sized farm ponds in the highlands, like big Paul Bunyan and the Babe the Blue Ox, and imagine big hoof prints all over the landscape. And the cumulative effect is that traps the surface runoff and keeps it where it is. So I'm a huge believer in ponds, love ponds. And we need to be building a lot more ponds on our farms. Every time we make a little bit of money, we build another pond. We built, 20, 30 ponds over the years, and we just keep building them every time we make a little bit of cash. Number 5, seasonality dominates biology. Seasonality dominates biology. If I'm a frog on the edge of a pond, I'm not expecting strawberries in February down at Walmart. Okay? I'm not going to eat strawberries in February. Now, if I'm a frog, I probably didn't can any or freeze any back during the season. But today, with some modern technology, okay, we can extend the season, we can preserve things, and we can push that seasonality. But as far as freshness and availability, we're going to celebrate the cycles. What's wrong? What's wrong emotionally, spiritually, to encourage the idea that, oh, it's springtime and strawberries will be in, and then raspberries, and then blackberries, and then apples, and we eat our way through the season in humble subservience and submission to the beauty of the cycles, instead of despising them and hating them. Well, it's on a radio program, guy in Vermont. This was in January, and he said, I'm having a house party next week, and I want corn on the cob. What's wrong with me having corn on the cob in Vermont? I said, well, why didn't you grow extra corn in last year and freeze it, and then you can have corn on the cob in Vermont? You know, this isn't who made us king to dominate all this? So the rest and growth of the cycles celebrate. Number 6, disturbance and rest cycles. I'm sitting on a frog, and I'm the frog sitting on the pond. Yeah. I'm the frog sitting on the pond, and off in the distance I hear a volcano. I remember the flood of the spring. I remember the drought of the summer. I remember the fire that came through. I'm watching animals come up, groundhogs and prairie dogs, and they're digging. If I was in Australia, they're wombats. They've uncovered wombat skeletons now. Wombat is like a great big cross between a groundhog and an armadillo. I was there in Australia, and a lady had tamed a couple of them with some carrots. And so she said, come over and I'll let you touch a wombat. And okay, so we went over to her house in the evening. They're nocturnal. And so she went out there, sure enough, with this little bag of carrot. Here came this wombat waddling up. The thing about 100 pounds. They have a kind of hard skeletal structure. About 100 pounds. They're, about 4 times the size of a big groundhog. And they dig. They dig holes. In fact, she had to bury a 10-foot deep fence around her house because they were digging under her house and undermining her house. They go down 10, 12 feet. How'd you like to run that with your tractor? Well, they've now found skeletons in Australia of wombats that were 9 feet tall. Imagine those holes. We're coming around the corner meeting that dude. Just like here in the U.S. now, we've found skeletons of beavers that were the size of a Volkswagen automobile. They could take down some trees, let me tell you. This disturbance and rest cycles is a big deal. I call this ecological exercise. We have this idea in our nation today, as people have become more and more disconnected from ecology, that the ecology can be stagnant. We can put an artificial boundary around this park, around this area, and it'll just stay like this. No, ecology doesn't stay like that. It doesn't even want to stay like that. It wants to have periodic disturbance as exercise, to move different species, different diversification, to restart things. Disturbance and rest cycles are really important. And so don't apologize. If you need to come out and you need to put an access lane through a place and cut down an old tree, and that's the best place for your access lane, cut down the old tree, put in your access lane. Disturbance has been happening for a long time, and if that allows you to better massage your landscape with loving caress, do it. It's okay to exercise. Number 7, the waste of one is the input for the next. There is no landfill. There is no away. Everything is cyclical. It's not linear. There's no away. There's no refuse. Everything is reused on site. Everything that is a waste product of one thing becomes the input of the next thing. There's no ultimate loss of matter. There's no ultimate loss of biomass. We have death, life, decomposition, regeneration, death, life, decomposition, regeneration. That cycle is ongoing. The waste of one's the input for the next. Manure feeds the plants. Number 8, I'm watching my time here. Number 8, processes are driven by local information. Everything that's going on here in this pond that I'm sitting on the edge of, the processes that are going on are done by local information. I call this indigenous adaptation. What fits here? And there's going to be a different principles or different rest and disturbance cycles, whether I'm in Ohio versus, Arizona. It's bounded by localness. One of our problems today is, I don't want to get too political here, but one of our problems is that we have arrogated to the federal government 90% of American decision-making power that's supposed to be done at the state and local level. And that's one of the reasons we have such bifurcation and polarization and animosity in our culture, because we have arrogated to the federal level all these little micromanaged things, and the stakes are so high. We talk about the politicians, the lobbyists, buying politicians. Well, let me tell you, if all of our decisions weren't for sale, nobody would be selling them. And our problem is that our politicians are so micromanaging. I'll get on the rabbit trail, but one of the things that we learned sitting at the pond is that the processes are driven by local information. How many deer are there? How many wolves are there? How many bison are there? How much water is there? It's a localized decision-making process. And so what we want as we think through this is we want a system that creates the most localized information possible. Number 9, I've got 12 by the way, all right, I'm cooking through. Number 9, the system runs primarily on perennials, not annuals. Now, are there annuals in nature? Absolutely. But most of the time, they're short-term healers. They're short-term placeholders until perennials can come in. Nature prefers perennials. Perennials have a very different energy flow than annuals. Perennials are extractive of solar energy. Did I say that right? Annuals are extractive of solar energy. Perennials are addition of energy in the ground. Because an annual extracts from the ground and makes this big seed, this big fruit, this big something up here, and it's depending on that to recreate itself next year when it's planted again. The perennial has to, by root structure, by its own carbohydrate savings account, it has to handle droughts and blizzards and floods and heat and all these things. And so the perennial takes energy and keeps pumping it into its root structure, into the what you don't see, everything that's below the ground, and that then provides its bank account and investment. Well, in doing so, it takes all of those carbohydrates and sends them out into the soil and develops soil. We call this pulsing the pasture when we're doing mob stocking, herbivorous solar conversion, lignified carbon sequestration, fertilization. Again, touching on U.S. I call it the U.S. policy. Remember, the U.S. subsidizes, well, I know the thing now is crop insurance. It sounds a lot better than subsidies. But the U.S. subsidizes I'm not asking for a subsidy. I'm just saying that our policy subsidizes only annuals and only 6: corn, cotton, soybeans, sugar, wheat, and rice. So our entire farm policy incentivizes annuals to the exclusion of perennials. And yet perennials is what drives ecology, it's what builds the soil, all those things. And this is why herbivores and sea creatures were the foundation of ancient diets before the industrial age, before the current mechanization, chemical fertilizing situation, because planting was arduous. Planting was difficult. When you're walking with a sharp stick behind an ox, you can't plant very much, you can't do very much. Grain was always extremely expensive. They didn't have, read Thomas Jefferson's farm book. You know, if we had the same, you know, ratios today, wheat would right now be, you know, $30 a bushel. Corn would be $30 a bushel. Imagine what that would do to the price of chicken. Suddenly, beef, if it was managed correctly, would be the peasant's food, which is the way it was throughout history, instead of chicken being the peasant's food. The only reason chicken is cheaper than beef is because we've chemicalized and mechanized to the point where grain is cheap for the first time in human history. And that apes the whole ecology of the perennial being the queen and the annual being the peasant. Number 10, quickly, polycultures. As I look around, I'm a frog, I'm looking around here, I'm seeing polycultures. I'm not seeing monocultures. I'm seeing polycultures, lots of diversity. There's multi-species of everything working in symbiosis, synergy, and competition. There are complex relationships, okay? And these complex relationships block pathogens and change the whole movement of pathogens and those kinds of things. You know, right now we're facing, you watching situations with this high-path avian influenza coming up through Texas, and now it's in the cows. Now it's killing people, and the worst thing is it killed 24 cats. And Americans are far more concerned about cats than kids. You just tell by how much they buy for pet food. So you know, you're going to be seeing this. And every one of these cases of high-path avian influenza is coming from a monoculture outfit. It's coming from a factory house, a concentration, or I call it concentration camp farming system, not from polycultures. Number 11, integration. I'm looking across the pond, and I'm seeing integration. Nothing is segregated. It's all highly integrated. Today, in modern American agriculture, you know, we grow the chickens over here, fed grain that's grown over here, that's fertilized from, you know, material from Russia and Morocco, and the manure, it goes over here, and the chickens are processed over here, and then they're sold over here, and the whole thing is broken up, highly segregated. I'm a frog sitting on the pond, and I'm seeing everything is integrated. And that's one of the things I'm such an encourager of kitchen chickens, okay? The animal to start with, if you're wanting to start, is with chickens. They're wonderful. We should be taking our kitchen scraps, feeding them to chickens, not putting them in the garbage to go to a landfill. 75% of everything that's gone in sanitary landfills in the U.S. is compostable. Folks, that's a highly segregated system. And by the way, this includes honoring the workers. There's no them and us. It's all just us. And finally, the 12th thing I'm noticing as a frog is that everything participates. I don't have the luxury as a frog of waking up one morning and saying, you know what, I'm just not going to, you know, I'm just not going to participate today. This thing can just go on without me. No, in nature, nothing gets to disconnect. Nothing gets to say, I won't participate. Today, we have many people in our country who think that they can have an authentic, credible food system without participating. The biggest lie in the world is, I want change, but I don't want to. They're all pointing out saying, well, if you do this, and if you do that, and if you do this, and if these people would do that, and if these people do that, you know what? If I want something to change, the guy that's going to change it is looking in the mirror at me. Okay? And so, non-farmers actually hold the key to sustainability in our culture. My recipe for participation to urbanites is get in your kitchen, Practice domestic culinary arts. Get in your kitchen. That's number 1. Number 2, grow and do something yourself, even if it's a quart jar of mung bean sprouts on the windowshelf. Participate in the majesty and the mystery and the magnificence of life. And number 3, find your local food treasures. That's my 3-part recipe for participation for urbanites. But your attendance here shows that you get participation. You didn't wake up this morning and say, you know what, we're not going to participate. So I salute every one of you. I honor you. You could have been anywhere today than here, and you've chosen to invest in a participatory mechanism to learn how to integrate better, how to be that frog on the edge of the pond better, and how to nest into our ecology for soil building, hydration, nutrient-dense food, and all the wonderful things that we're going to enjoy the next 2 days. So thank you for being here. Thank you for deciding to participate. Thank you for coming. And thank you for being part of the change that we're looking for in our country. It needs us. It needs you. We all need to pull together to make our place a better place to nest and to sit on the edge of our ponds. Thank you.
Joel. Thank you, Joel. We got more to come. Wow, we've got a crowd. Look at that out there. We set up, I think, 1,500 chairs. So a lot of people out there, we appreciate you being here. But next up, we have, let's see if this works. Here we go. Helps when you turn it on. There we go. We couldn't find Jack of all trades. You've heard of Jack of all trades, right? So we did one better. We brought in Ann of all trades. All right, listen to that. You know Ann of all trades. So I don't know why she told me this, but she said she's technologically retarded. I said, I don't think that I want to say that. That's kind of a strange qualification for somebody that has 400,000 followers on YouTube. I think I have 10, you know. She has 400,000 followers on YouTube. That's why some of you know her. She has 300 on Instagram, 300 on Facebook. And you'll be able to mingle with her tonight at the Social Summit and Barbecue. Her name's back there on with the table, so make sure you meet Ann back there. I asked her for one thing that people would not know about her. She speaks fluent Chinese. Isn't that interesting? Okay, please help me welcome to the stage Ann Briggs from Ann of All Trades.
Thank you so much. Perfect. Oh yeah, look at that. Hello, I'm Ann. Thank you all so much for being here and for having me. And I told him about my technological issues because, I mean, I can barely check my email, but I'm a farmer and I can figure out what I have to figure out. And so now let me just see, is this how we go to it? Ta-da! One of my favorite things is crappy Photoshop. And so I, can't make my own PowerPoint presentation, but I could make this beautiful image for you here. How many here have animals? And how many want animals? Okay, excellent. So those that have animals can probably say that definitively your life with animals is chaos. You are, as farmers, going to be spending basically the rest of your life putting out fires, and hopefully we can at least keep the ones that we want to keep burning, and then put the other ones out as quickly and efficiently as possible. And I feel like I'm maybe standing too close to the thing, so I'll try not to do that. So here's the thing about what we're going to talk about today is we are going to talk about chaos management. Obviously, that's the title of this talk. Boop. But I am not an expert at chaos management. I like to give that disclaimer right away. One of my favorite quotes is that we teach best what we most need to learn. And if you've ever seen any of my content online, you probably know that there's a family of about 1,000 squirrels living in my brain, and my entire life's mission is trying to herd those squirrels in some sort of logical manner. And so I will just say that I like having to manage my own life and my own enormous ambitions, my poor husband, has been such a huge challenge that it's forced me to get very, very good at time management and project management, and also get very good at asking for help and admitting failure, and most importantly, prioritizing what's actually important. And so I think all of us, I mean, if you're anything like me, you probably have found yourself saying at one time or another, in like 2 weeks or a month or whatever it is, this will happen, and then after that, everything's going to slow down. And I hate to be the one to crush your dreams, but you're never going to get it all done. Things are never going to actually slow down. And so our job then as chaos managers is going to be figuring out how to, amidst 1,000 fires burning around us, how to tend to the ones that are important and let the other ones just burn out on their own. And so time management, which hilariously is what so many people came to me asking, how do you manage your time? How do you get so much done? All these other things. So many people asked me that I decided to write a book about that, which is hilarious to my husband because he actually sees what our life is like and is like, but the most important thing is knowing what the most important thing is. And when we are putting out fires all the time, it's actually really, really, really hard to discern what's actually important. And so one of my favorite little just like isms about time management and goal and project management is that if we write our goals down, we are 35% more likely to achieve them. If we say them out loud, we're 50% more likely to achieve them. But if we actually put them on our calendar and seek accountability to make sure that things get done when we say that they're done, or when we say that they're going to be done, then we are 75% more likely than someone who just has some vague, undefined thing hanging out in the ether in front of them. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So I just want to, darn tootin', this is, okay. So this is the Instagram version of farming, but let's be honest that even with the best, this is cheddar, I got my first dairy cow 5 years ago, and now I have 18 cows, and that escalated in a real hurry. This is my favorite cow, Cheddar, though, and she's literally the best in the world. But sometimes, actually a lot of times, things don't go quite as planned. They say don't cry over spilled milk, but who here's ever milked an animal? Yeah, you probably have cried over spilled milk, because boy howdy, does it take a whole lot of time, work, and effort to get from the point that you have this to where you have the opportunity to potentially have some usable milk at the end of it. By the way, that's not just milk spilled all over me. She was also kind enough to pee on me and poop right in the milk, which made it splash all up. Some ended up in my mouth, and it wasn't the best day ever. Some just real quick things. Also, I just think it's probably, oops, I went too far. Some real quick things. So I'm talking about time, chaos management, all those things. And I'm such an expert at that for a 30-minute talk, I have 52 slides. So obviously, we're probably not going to get through them all. And that's totally okay, because we're dealing with what's important first. So take that lesson. Multitasking is a myth. I'm going to just hit these things really quick. It took me all of my 20s to realize that the more stones I tried to simultaneously push up a hill at once, the more stones that ultimately fell down the hill and rolled over my foot as they were going by. And I am now realizing that doing less is actually better. And yes, my online persona is Anne of all trades. And one thing that I have realized is that when I am like very organized and when I am practicing my best time management skills and all those things, life still can be absolute and total chaos. But if I only try to push 3 stones up a hill at the same time, and by the way, I don't mean at the exact same time, I'm talking about 3 general stones during the same week. I'm going to push one of the stones up the hill. During the same week, I'm going to push a different one up and the other one too. And that managing 3, like I can juggle 3 balls. I can't juggle 5 balls. I can't juggle 10 stones without getting hurt. So multitasking is a myth. That is 100% true, because truly the best way that we're going to be the most effective is if we have our entire focus on one thing at a time. And in that, if I'm maybe milking my cow, I could listen to an audiobook to improve my life or something, or I could listen to a podcast, or maybe while I'm digging a hole, I could do those things too. When I'm folding the laundry, I could maybe talk to my husband about something. Those are things that are like mindless, repetitive tasks that, yes, for those who are super, super argumentative in the audience, they will say, yes, multitasking is a myth, or multitasking is possible. In those contexts, that is true. However, the more that I have been able to give my entire focus to whatever I'm doing, even if it is something totally menial, something totally repetitive and meaningless, my capacity for pain actually increases. So I think for so many of us in this digital age, it's so easy to just constantly have something filling our brain and our time and our hands at all times. And here's just a quick side story, because we obviously have plenty of time for these. The reason I got a dairy cow, my first dairy cow, was not actually probably the reason that most of you might someday get a dairy cow. Most of you probably want milk, and that's great. I don't even really drink milk, but what I did need from my dairy cow was something that relied on me, that made me consistent, that then also provided me a peaceful, quiet start to every single day. And that is exactly what my cow gave me. And though I was raised in the church and I had carried so much shame my whole life because I'd seen everyone around me be so good at waking up at 5 a.m. and having their morning prayers and writing in their journal and reading their Bible, and I have thousands of journals that have 1 page of entries in them. And, the first, paragraph of Genesis was highlighted 4,000 times. But beyond that, the first time in my entire life that I had ever gotten up and done something and actually had, time to have morning prayers and quiet time, and the thing that I actually needed more than anything else in life, just a undistracted moment where it's me and an animal who's counting on me that I have a relationship with, that actually opened up the entire world of possibilities for me. Of course, I couldn't stop with 1, but here's the thing. We do what's important. I realized what the cows were doing for me, and then I started activating other pieces of the levers that we're going to talk about in just a moment. All right, so time management is a way that we basically are today in capitalist society creating the opportunity to be more distracted and do more things that matter less. If we get super efficient at checking our email and running through our list, guess what happens? When you're really good at responding to all the emails that are in your email box, you then are all those people will reply back. And you're creating more and more and more. And so poor John, having tried to email me multiple times for this event, I stopped checking my email a year and a half ago, and the people that need to know how to get through that stuff do, but the wildest thing happened when I stopped checking my email. All the people who were making their problems my problem every single day found other solutions. Well, I assume. I mean, it's been a year and a half since they last emailed me, so hopefully, or since I last emailed them back. But I just want to make those kinds of connections in our brain, because to us, like, time is our only non-renewable resource. Our time, our energy, and our very limited capacity in the 4,000 weeks that we get to spend awake on this planet, if we're lucky, if we're blessed, we need to be sure that we are living with a sense of purpose that with a sense of purpose that reflects what we feel called to do. And so as farmers, even if we have outside jobs, I work full time and I farm in the margins, and mercifully I was able to find some hired help to help me with the cows once I realized that 18 cows is too many for me. But with all that, what was most important to me is the thing that I needed to prioritize more than having my job or anything else. And my husband quit his job 2 years ago. He worked in corporate America. He decided to work with me, and I think he's regretted that choice a lot of times. But one of the first work fights that we had was about milking the cows. And it was like, I was like, this is my number one priority, because milking the cows helps me to do every other thing that I also have to do in a day. And I know you don't understand it because you've never squeezed a cow teat, but he, once he kind of had spent some more time around me, he was like, oh, so this is something we're going to prioritize. We're going to put the things that are the most important to you first, and then all the other stuff that feel important to me, because I used to work at Amazon, are going to be put second to that. And so, mercifully, there's where the technology stuff is great, because Adam now helps me with all that stuff, and he makes sure that I don't miss anything really, really important on the emails and all the other things. So the other thing that I think is really important to just touch on really quickly is that self-sufficiency is a farce. And I might be getting myself in a little bit of hot water here, because this is the Food Independence Summit, but I genuinely believe that each one of us has certain things that we can do exceptionally well, and if we actually allow ourselves the time and prioritize our best focus, then we will be able to generate whatever we need to generate to be able to positively contribute to the rest of our community, which can help us fill in those gaps. And I was raised in a Christian community that is basically a commune, and so I was modeled what this looked like, where everyone has their special thing that they can contribute, and then everyone works together to make things better, to help fill in all the gaps. And my friends now, I specifically seek out people within our community, and I'm like, what do you need? What's the gap that's missing there? And how can I help you find someone else to help you fill it, so that you don't have to do more than you have the time, energy, and capacity to do well? And again, this is still a lesson that I'm still learning. I just purchased, 12 tubas on the internet to restore, because that seemed like a good idea. But the real thing is that when we are doing any of the things that we're doing, we really do need to realize that things are going to go wrong, and we need to know how it is that we're going to keep everything else from falling apart when those things go wrong. Hilariously, I'm running on very little sleep right now, because as I was leaving yesterday to come here, my livestock guardian dog suddenly decided that was the time that she needed to start learning how to climb over gates. And so I was trying to fix the gates, and as I was fixing the gates, I looked over and I noticed some water dripping from the side of the barn, and I was like, oh, no. So I went into my office, which holds everything that I hold dear, and also the apartment above the barn that we live in, and the air conditioner had somehow flooded the entire place. And so, I have pretty good infrastructure. I have things set up pretty well to not go wrong. I have this incredible electric line system that should keep the dogs from doing any of the things that they were doing the last couple days. But it turns out that my local arborist, my partner in the community, who helps me with lots of things, had accidentally backed his truck right into the pole that holds up my electric line, which made the electric line go down. I didn't see it because he also covered it with mulch. And so then I was like, oh, well, the electric line. So then, it's like I was supposed to leave at 9:30 a.m. At 2:30 p.m., I'm out there with my hay rake, raking the mulch off of the fence post and shoveling water out of my office. And here's the thing. Things are going to go wrong. We need to know what we're going to do when they do. So it is very important. And again, I said self-sufficiency is a farce. And though it is possible, sorry, I get so excited. Though it is possible to, like, you know, if you're going to be a total hermit and that's your thing and you literally just want to live in a cave and do that, I will say that your life will get very, very lonely. And when your cows escape and, you know, like everything goes to crap, or you know, stab yourself with a knife in the middle of the night while making nachos, then you end up needing a backup plan. And so this is my friend Tyler. Tyler is our neighbor, and she is my backup plan for everything, and I am hers. And I had been farming by myself for 10 years before I met Tyler, and I was like, I don't want to do this by myself anymore. And she said, I don't want to do this by myself anymore. Guess what? Tyler is a dairy farmer, and she convinced me to get my first cow. This is now going to go real quick because I'm just going to go through these slides and just talk about infrastructure things that help my life, at least normally, run a little bit smoother. And so if we have a backup person, then we also need to have a backup place. If we're going to have animals and we're ever going to be gone, we need to have one place that we can reliably lock them up and feed them and make sure that everything's going to be okay if we're not there to chase them down the highway and then end up in the police blotter later. So with all this stuff, I think we see so many people, I mean, at least I do, being on social media, like having really, really expensive infrastructure and setups and things that just truly make everything about farming seem unapproachable. But let me just tell you that if, actually Joel was just up here, and Joel has a great book. It's called You Can Farm. And while the price lists for some of the things that he talks about in that book have changed, one of my favorite things about Joel is that he uses this phrase that my grandpa always used to use too. Use what you've got to get where you need to go. And I have started very small and very humble. For those of you who haven't seen my stuff online, when I started doing all this 12 years ago, all of our food was coming from the food bank. We were dead broke, and trying to get gas in my car to go to work was a huge struggle. My husband was unemployed for almost a year, and just like things were really, really hard. And that is what drove me to put my first seed in the ground. And by ground, I meant like straight horse manure, and it didn't work that well the first time. But you know what? I grew some great lettuce. And so once we learn more about soil science, things get really, really exciting. But that's where I started. And it's actually, even as I've continued to build a business and everything else, my frugality is also what has sustained my ability to continue to grow things. And so my friends make fun of me all the time because my former career, I have had many of them, but my most recent former career was teaching fine woodworking. So I can build a beautiful Windsor chair or a whiskey cabinet on the wall, but all my friends who come over are like, what is that? When they see my homemade seed drill or my pallet goat milking, like actually basically everything's pallets. We don't even need to go any further into that. But with all of that, the best thing, and the one thing I want you to take away from this talk is ABL. Always be learning. Because as I have OCD, like genuine OCD, like I count steps and things like obsessively, which used to be a huge problem, but hilariously, when I started farming, it actually became super, super useful because I now know exactly how many steps it takes me to do everything, and I am constantly looking for ways to take less steps, and I know exactly how long it takes me to do things, assuming that I also don't start the farm on fire while I'm doing them. And so then I can actually really accurately predict how long it's going to take me, and basically becoming absolutely obsessed with observing every single pain point, frustration, whatever else, and then finding some super janky way to jerry-rig it on my farm. Like, I have become a very efficient farmer, and I'm really, really proud of that. So I think about the good Lord gave us two hands, and as long as one of them's not in a cast, we should be carrying something in both hands both ways everywhere that we go. We, I don't expect all of you to count your steps, but it is a really good thing to just if you have your cell phone with you, start using a timer. Not only can you make a game out of beating yourself, literally making your chores go faster every day if that's what you want to do. Some of us want to literally spend an hour milking our cows, and that's okay too. Actually, that's the far more important thing than beating yourself with this other stuff. But every time that I'm going anywhere, I am keeping track of what's happening there, which then also has lent itself very well to being a good business person, because I never charge less than what it actually costs me time-wise to do things, and all of those things are super great. So in that, I just want to show you, so this is our feed room for the cows, and this barn, by the way, you'll see some more pictures of it in a second, but this barn is literally made out of trees, and then it was cedar seconds, this is not a fancy barn. It just became $8,000 fancier because after 5 years of using a barn with a dirt floor for our dairy business that we were doing, we were able to save up enough money to pour concrete, which makes things way easier when the cows poop and pee on the floor, and also do some other really fun projects like this. So I used to have to walk all the way around to pour the food into the stanchions where we feed the cows. But now we just cut these sweet little windows in, and I want you to also look at every single 2x4, every single piece of hardware, everything in there is recycled, aka free and or very, very cheap. But in my step counting, I was like, oh, if we cut little windows in here, not only can I make myself look like a total idiot while posing for you, because I couldn't actually do this while the cows were in there, because the cows, it's a business, we have to, do that. So anyway, here's me pretending to be a cow in our very efficient setup now. We, again, just thinking about all the problems that we were having and keeping track of those, and then just thinking about those things and being like, how could I maybe solve that next time? We noticed that when we were first milking some of our more ornery cows, it would help to have their calf in there with them. So we grabbed another few scrap pieces of wood and built a little calf pen so that the calf can stand next to the mom while we milk, but not get in the way. And then, again, more things about how could I put the things that I need in my way, on the way? So this is all the stuff that we use for every cow is in every stanchion. And then I noticed how much it was ruining my day every single day to deal with that dang chain, one-handed, because I was also carrying a bucket full of water, which weighs 40 pounds, and trying to wrap it around and do all that while balancing and trying to keep the calves in with my legs. I was like, this sucks. So these are the coolest gate latches ever. They're the only goat-proof, everything-proof gate latches I've ever found. But the coolest thing is you can karate kick them to shut them, open them, all those things, and then all you have to, and the best part is, city people, for whatever reason, cannot seem to figure these out, so it's also a great, great thing to have. We share Tyler and I share the dairy barn and that whole farm area where we're keeping the dairy cows with her husband's CSA, community supported agriculture business. And so the farm hands were constantly stealing my hoses and or cutting them off to fill up a tractor implement or whatever, and I just got so sick and tired of that I was like, I am literally gonna buy 2 of everything that I ever need, and I'm gonna have it with me at all times. So this is what the back of my Cub Cadet looks like all the time. It's got some lint rollers to lint roll the ticks off of me once I leave the field. It's got a knife so that I can cut some baling twine and use that to fix everything, because that's what we do. It's got a hose with a quick connect, extra poles, fencing, all that stuff. And this one, it's going to be a little bit hard to see, but another huge problem we kept having is because the barn is not actually attached to the fencing. We move our cows every day, so there's very little hard fencing. And so I needed to make a pathway that would stop the cows from running off instead of going where they're supposed to go. So did it have to be fancy? Absolutely not. It is, again, you probably can't see it super clearly, but it's actually just 2 ropes that are the exact correct length, so that when we need to move the cows, it looks like the electric fence that we have for the cows that keeps them in. And we literally just, there's a hook on it, and you just pull the hook, and now you have a lane where the cows cannot wander. So we want to farm smarter. Again, we're going to have to speed things up here because, Oh, this one's really important. I think like people ask me, how do you stay motivated? Because I do work like 18 hours a day, and like sometimes farm life really sucks. But I realized basically in the first month that I had cows that like sometimes there was certain things about it that just were not great. And actually I've had goats now for almost a decade. Oh, just 10 years actually just passed. So there was a lot of times with the goats that I was like, this is not worth it. But knowing exactly why I was doing the things that I was doing, again, my motivations are probably very different than some of y'all's, but knowing exactly why I was doing it then gave me the correct context to then be like, oh, you know what? I chose this. And I could choose to not choose it tomorrow if I wanted to. I could choose to have a bad attitude, or I could choose to be in there and be like, wow, what a phenomenal opportunity to be able to be a part of my community, to do something that feels so dang good to do. Because I tell you what, squeezing a teat in the morning is way better than checking emails when I used to work in tech. I will move cow fences in 95-degree weather any day of the week if the alternative is being trapped in a cubicle watching the 28 sunny days we got a year in Seattle just fly right by and spending 2 hours in traffic both ways to and from work. So even the crappiest crap, like when I'm shoveling crap, I often am like, you know what, I chose to do this. And you know what, that has changed my perspective so much that I actually really, really like shoveling poop and doing some of the really, really gross, not as awesome things. Listen, get interested in composting and growing mushrooms, and suddenly poop is going to be your new favorite thing in the world. We're just going to keep going on here so we can just look at a few more things. So another big thing that I've done is I have put every single thing that I need in the way, on the way to where it's doing, where I need to use it. This probably looks like poor stewardship from the outside because I break a lot of, we live in Tennessee. It rains a lot, the sun is very harsh, things break, things wear down really quickly. I have tools that are rusty all the time. I know how to fix them, don't worry. But I started going to like farm auctions or even just like Sunday sales and getting $2 shovels and whatever else. And so though it now looks like, not great always because there's literal piles of crap everywhere and crap everywhere, it's become so helpful because I literally need, everything that I need is always right where I need it. And so as I'm walking into the garden, there's my shovels and all the other stuff that I might need in the garden. And when they break, it's $2 to fix it. And I tell you what, having to not wander around 30 acres wondering where my dad put the shovel that he was using like 6 months ago, like worth the $2 every day of the week. And again, I've thought about my steps. So I'm like, I often have to come out of the barn when I'm not carrying water buckets. So what I should do is put a little wheelbarrow there, and I'll put the wheelbarrow just like right in front of the gate, and I'll be able to shovel up a little bit of compost as I leave the gates after I've given the water. And as it happens, my compost pile is right next to the exit of the barn, which also happens to be right next to the garden where I'll use the compost. And I think I am out of time, so I'm just going to show you a few other really quick hacks. This little system around my fence line is an electric line that I use little alligator clips. So instead of having to carry around those 40-pound chargers anymore, I literally just have this electric line that stays hot all the time, which, by the way, also keeps deer out, keeps raccoons out, keeps groundhogs out, keeps squirrels out, like all the things. And now when I set up an electric line, I can just use an alligator clip to put that on. This is an automatic hose clip thing, so you don't have to screw on the little things every time. I've installed these literally everywhere. This is a cow chute made out of broken cow gates. We don't need to spend $7,000. There's mud on our farm just like everyone else's. You can see the electric lines there with the fly traps, and I will just keep, So literally, never bend over again. Get yourself a restaurant supply, at a restaurant supply store, get a little sweeper like that, and your back will thank you. And then, most importantly, get organized. Know where everything that you have is, and so you can find it. Anyway, that is good. We made it to like slide like 15, so we're good. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ann. She made it to slide 15. She sent me 52, so you'll have to talk to her backstage, but you can learn a lot more on their YouTube channel, obviously. So thank you very much, Ann. So next up, we've got a topic that I want to know about. It's called Winning the War on Weeds. How many of you have weeds? I'm looking at, there are a lot of hands that are down, so you either must not be having a garden, or you've won the war on weeds and we don't need this presentation from John. I'm kidding. So, John Moody is originally from Youngstown, Ohio. He hails from Louisville, Kentucky right now. He brought his whole family, or most of the family, yesterday. He has 6 kids. Congratulations. I love large families. So he's been a homesteader for 15 years, so he knows a little bit about weeds. But here's what you may not know. He used to be in a singing and dancing group on cruise ships and the like. So are you going to do a dance up here? No? It's just winning war on weeds. Okay, please give a warm welcome to Mr. John Moody.
Great. So as John said, have 6 kids, beautiful wife. In this picture, if you look very closely, if you have 20/10 vision, you can see number 6. So we've been homesteading for 15 years. I'm a very big fan of efficient homesteading. My favorite hobby is folding laundry while people are still inside of it, and then throwing it across the room. So me and my kids do judo and jujitsu. John said I'm the most dangerous speaker at the event this year, but I really think he is with his emphasis on the schedule. We bought our 35 acres back in 2009. I knew nothing about homesteading and farming when we bought our acreage. I grew up Lower West Side of Youngstown, Ohio. I was your standard 1980s kids, Cheerios eating, cartoon watching, video game playing. So I did something that I did not know you could do when you bought a farm. I bought a farm, soil not included. True, all we had was rock and less than 0.5% organic matter clay. Incredible. I was such a stubborn person that I was not going to own 35 acres of land and not be able to grow food. So for the first 2 years, I grew in cardboard boxes on top of the soil because I borrowed a tiller from the neighbor, and the tiller broke before the soil did. That's how bad our soil was. The extension agent for our county, when she came to our farm, she goes, "Did you know you had the worst soil in almost the entire county, in this part of the county?" I'm like, why don't you all put placards like this above the, like little pop-ups in video games that tell you what you're getting into? So I spent 3 years learning to build soil. I did like the deepest dive imaginable, because people are like, "Oh yeah, you could have good soil, John, 10, 15 years. Like, who got time for that? Like, I got kids on the way who I need to feed. So I learned to build roughly 6 inches of excellent growing soil in as little as 18 to 24 months. So almost all of our main growing spaces on the farm now run plus 20% organic matter. And we can do that repeatedly, block by block over the farm in about 18 to 24 months of soil building. Just absolutely beautiful soil. But the soil created a problem, another problem I was not kind of prepared for. And I discovered this problem probably around 2013, 2014, once we had really beautiful soil. Because there's a problem with us adults in the room. We're very dumb at times. And it was a, mid-July Kentucky morning. And how many of you are from Kentucky? Great. So if you're from Kentucky, what is it like in July? It's horrible. Why does anyone live in Kentucky? It's like 150% humidity and 95 degrees at 6 in the morning. And we're out for the 3rd morning in a row with my kids trying to reclaim our garden. because we have all of this really healthy, fertile soil. And what really likes healthy, fertile soil? Weeds. And so, like, you know, I have kids who are pretty large, and the weeds are bigger than they are. And they're like, Dad, you know, I can't find the plants. I'm losing children for days on end because they're just laying down and going to sleep. Like, the weeds are better cover than the air conditioning in our old house. And the thing that stuck out to me is my children were learning to hate homesteading and growing food. And this is one of the dangers for us as adults. We will do things we hate because we're dumb, and then we'll wonder why our children won't follow in our footsteps. And so I was like, this is a problem I need to fix. So I went from doing a deep dive on solving the issue of soil to solving the issue of weeds. And that really let us dial in the ability to grow tremendous amounts of food in as little time as possible with as little work as possible. Because I'm all for working hard. You know, it's just a very biblical thing. If a man does not work, he should not eat. But there's no reason to work harder than you ought or need to. So I want to give you three summary ways to help you with your weed woes. And the first one is this: you need to grow less. All of you are here because you are overly ambitious people. You know, one of my favorite demotivational images, have you ever seen the demotivational images? It says, every dead body on Mount Everest was once a motivated climber. So we're those kind of people. We like biting off more than we can chew. And it's actually not good, because that's the only way you'd be sitting here on a Wednesday morning, you know, at a homesteading event. You're a highly motivated person. What really drove this home to me was back around 2017, driving home on a Friday night from judo. I get a text from a friend, and he goes, I really, really need to talk to you, John. I have a significant problem I have to talk to you about tonight. And since I went to seminary and stuff, I'm like, man, this guy has marriage issues, or like one of his kids is, like, what's going on? So I get home, immediately call him up, and he's like, John, I have a garden problem. I'm like, dude, it is 10:30 on a Friday night. What garden problem do you have that is this serious? And so earlier that winter, him and 3 families from his church had decided that they were going to do like a shared community garden among these 4 large homeschooling families. You know, it's like 4 families, 47 children. Like, we're going to do this. These are people who have not successfully grown mint in a windowsill. Guess what size garden they decided to kick off this endeavor with? You know, we could do like old style auction here. You know, throw out some numbers. What size garden? You are 4 families. You have never grown anything in your life. Half an acre, good guess. Yeah, they started with, you know, somewhere between 10 and 20,000 square foot garden with bees and chickens. And the best part is none of them live on this property. It's not a property on one of the families. It's like one of the families owns the land. It's like outside of Louisville, or like a member of the family of one of the families owns the land. So they have a 15, 20,000-ish square foot garden for the first time ever, half an hour outside of Louisville, Kentucky, with bees and chickens. The chickens were the first to go. Chickens were harmed in the process of filming this documentary, unfortunately. And you know, they spent, like, you know, they rented a tiller, they bought chickens, they built a coop, they spent thousands of dollars on plants. And you know, May was great. May in Kentucky is like heaven. It's beautiful, it's sunny, but not hot, there's no humidity yet. They get into June, and things start to disappear from the garden, because there's these things called deer in Kentucky, if you've never heard of those. You know, but by July, there is no garden at all. There's just a jungle. He sent me a picture. You know, he like you can see like one little cherry tomato like clawing for life over the 4-foot weeds. And so these families had an emergency meeting, and they're like, and there's always that one guy you're friends with. He's the one who's going to, in the future, be on Everest. And he's like, we must reclaim the garden. We cannot lose. And so he's like, we're going to get all of our families together, and we're going to weed 10 hours a day Saturday and Sunday. All of our children could put in 10 hours. You know, my little 3-year-old who's toddling around, like, we'll give him a sai, a really sharp knife, just let him go at it right at ground level. He's like, we're going to reclaim, we are not going to lose all of this investment. And my friend Scott's like, this guy is insane. He's like, what have we done? Too ambitious. No one looks back on a life that consists of nothing but small and medium-sized successes and regrets it. We have done nothing but the last 6 years of homesteading but pull our deer fencing back closer and closer on our cultivated growing spaces. We have been able to do more as a family by doing less well. You will just be so much better off. So you need to grow less. And you know, the rule I want to give you is, how do you know you have appropriately sized growing spaces? So John, make this easy for me. You have a growing space that is the right size for you and your family when you can let not a single weed go to seed. That's it. You have the right size growing space when you can let not a single weed go to seed. And I'm not talking about because you're running through with Roundup every other Thursday. Or you know, you're the guy with the tractor, and the tractor is the solution to every problem. Wife upset, tractor. You know, like roadway washed out, tractor. You know, so that's not the solution we're talking about. So you have the right size growing space when you can manage it in such a way that you have nothing go to seed that you don't want to go to seed. So second, be like, this guy's a politician, talking out of both sides of his mouth. You need to grow more. It's really, really true. You need to grow more. You know, stop for a minute. Be like the guy who's like 8 rows back on the left whose eyes are closed. Close your eyes. Imagine in your mind what a perfect garden looks like. What does your perfect garden look like? I know when I first started growing food, what I thought a perfect garden looked like. I passed on the way up here. It was really cool. Down where I live in Kentucky, almost nobody has gardens. And driving up through this part of Ohio, it's like 1 out of 3 houses had gardens. But what does the perfect garden look like? Well, you till up a piece of land and you plant a tomato. And then you plant a tomato. Then you plant a tomato. And what do you spend the next 4 months of your life doing? It's like children in kindergarten class. You are trying to keep them from touching each other for 4 months. It's like, you know, and you live in constant fear and dread that another plant might get too close to your tomato plant and cause problems. How many of you think of gardens that way, where everything is in isolation? I always call it, you know, you have bare dirt exposed to the sunlight for 4 months, and isolated plants living on desert islands. It's a horrible way to grow a garden. This is my ideal garden. This is how we grow. Whenever we're planning out our growing spaces, our growing beds, my goal is to not let a single electron that comes from the sun reach the soil by July. I want my garden to be the world's greatest solar collector and conversion unit. I want to see no bare soil. And if I can get away with it, I want it to be nothing but a sea of living green. And it's amazing. Your plants will be infinitely healthier. You will get much higher Briggs numbers this way. Your garden will become significantly more drought resistant. Your plants will have superb disease resistance this way. Because again, instead of it being your tomato plant all alone in the ground, its roots singing all by myself. You know, where they're just baking in the sun, constantly stressed. The tomatoes can trade with the clovers, can trade with the basils. You have all of these plants working together to mobilize the health of the soil, to encourage the health of the plants. How many of you have ever seen a garden this densely grown? Anyone, a few of you? How many of you could ever imagine growing a garden this densely? I'm going to go back because there's really 5 things you should be growing in your garden. You should be growing food. In my opinion, food should be no more than 50% of the square footage of your garden. 50%. And I mean, for most people, it's really less than that when you think about it. When you think about a typical tilled garden with plants laid out in separation, if you look at studies, roughly 70 to 75% of the ground level space is open. So most of you are already growing gardens that at most are 25% space efficient, doing kind of traditional gardening methods. So you definitely want to grow food. How many of you buy fertilizer for your garden? Who has to buy fertilizer every year to fertilize plants, replenish nutrients? You can grow your own fertilizer right in your garden. We grow 100% of our own nitrogen for our garden at this point. We do not have to import any nitrogen into any of our growing spaces. So you should be growing fertilizer at the same time you are growing food. You should be growing animal feed. And not just the discards from the food part, but for our rabbits, for our chickens, for our pigs, our annual growing spaces provide up to 1/3 to 1/2 of what we feed them during the year. Depending, obviously, there's this seasonal cycle of different things peaking and what's available and whatnot. So we're growing fertilizer, we're growing animal feed, we are growing pharmaceuticals in our garden spaces, and then we are growing flowers. All of this should be going on at the same time. Pests hate this. Diseases hate this in your annual growing spaces because it's confusing to them. It's, if I'm a pest, what am I looking for? I'm looking for that stressed pepper plant that is sitting all by itself on a sun-baked hillside just asking me to eat it. I don't want to be a pest and have to spend 40 minutes looking through your garden to figure out what plant's the right one for me to eat. And I certainly don't want that plant protected by a bunch of other plants that I don't like to eat or that are dangerous to me. So this is what our garden spaces look like over the course of a year. We do things like undercropping and overcropping. We do very, very intentional, very, very tight companion planting. And we are companion planting plants that are as opposite as possible to the main food crops. Because what we're looking for is these kind of things that really annoy diseases and pests, so they cannot be passed from one to the other. So this is a good example. This is us doing, and we're also gardening 4-dimensionally, which I don't really have time to talk about fully today. But how many of you lay out your garden on a sheet of paper? Almost, that's how you think about a garden. You take a 2-dimensional sheet of paper and you lay out your garden. But your garden grows in 3 dimensions because there's also height out in the garden. And then there's also time. And when you can manage all 4 of those, I can grow more food in 2,000 square feet than I used to be able to grow in 20 through good space and time management. And so here we have cucumbers. Underneath the cucumbers, we have basil. Really great plant to match up against cucumbers, very fragrant. Pests and stuff doesn't like it. Underneath the basil, we have our fertilizer and animal forage coming in of clover. And that's going to grow up underneath the basil because as the basil and the cucumbers get taller, I want to continue to have a dense ground cover underneath them. And then next to those, I have some bush beans. That, those are kind of a short crop, so we're matching timing here. The bush beans are going to come out by the time that the basil and the cucumbers fully shade them. And then I have peppers, and all of this starts over again with a row of peppers. And then, for the peppers, we might put different fragrant plants, or I think for these peppers right next to those, we did calendula and marigolds. And then we did clover underneath. And so now in one block of space, we're growing 4, 5, 6 different things all at the same time. This is intensive rather than extensive growing. You can get so much more food this way for so much less work. Just imagine getting 3 or 4 times more food from 1/4, 1/2, 1/3, 1/10 of the space. Because this is what I discovered over time. I was just killing myself managing so much space poorly. Other things you need to know about growing more in tight spaces. This will reduce the stress on your plants immeasurably. When we do on-farm classes, I'll take a thermometer and I always leave a couple bare spots in our growing spaces, and I will stick the thermometer into the bare spot in a Kentucky July, a Kentucky August. Guess what the top inch of the soil is reading? 130, 135 degrees. What's that doing to your water? What's that doing to your soil microbiome? What is that doing to your nitrogen? Guess what happens to nitrogen and carbon when temperatures get that high and they're exposed to direct sunlight? It's gone. You know, it is out of there. You're losing all of that by exposing soil. So you actually end up conserving water. And what about nutrients? When you have all of these roots in the ground, nutrients are mobilized so much more efficiently because the soil food web is strong, moisture is retained, and microbes are constantly being fed. So they're constantly doing their job of liberating nutrients for your plants. Because a lot of you are thinking like, John, this sounds great, but aren't all the plants going to die? There's not enough water. There's not enough food. Isn't that what you've been told? Why the plants need all of this space? Do pastures need all of this space? There's nowhere else we ever see this idea that plants need like all of this isolated space to grow healthfully. And so over time, if you do this right, your soil becomes almost bulletproof, which makes growing a lot more in a small space a lot easier. So this is another example, trellised banana peppers underneath a clover bed. Clover is just one of the best things, at least in our area, that we can grow as what's called an understory. And if you're somebody who's a little bit more commercial grower, really recommend go to Facebook, that very, very dark place. You know, this is like, what's that movie, The Lion King? You know, it's like that's the place we don't go. Go to Facebook, the place we don't go, and look up Steve Diver, who oversees one of the University of Kentucky extension farms. He is a beyond organic farmer who's been a friend of mine now for a decade, who can give you good tools to do this type of thinking at a more commercial scale. So if you're not like a backyard garden scale. And again, clovers, this is chives growing underneath cucumbers that are going to come up. And then, you know, with a clover and you can also see I think those are calendula coming in as well. And now I got this picture on purpose because you're going, John, I can barely see the plants. Isn't this a problem? No, it's a solution because we have little hand size. One of our favorite farm tools, a little hand size, it's like 6-inch blade, 6-inch handle, will go through these beds if the understory crops become too aggressive, and you just chop and drop it. And now you're growing your own mulch. Or we chop it, and here is your rabbit food. Or we chop it, and here is your pig feed. Or we chop it, and here is your free clover seed that you grow yourself so you're not buying $30 a pound cover crop seed. This isn't a problem, this is a solution. Just takes the right tool and the right mindset. And again, what would you rather spend your time doing? Would you rather spend 5 minutes in the morning chopping down a cover crop that's reducing your feed bill for your animals and reducing your fertilizer bill, or do you want to spend 50 minutes weeding? I know which choice I'm making every time. I was very good at multiple choice tests as a child. So this is a solution looking for a problem rather than a problem looking for a solution. If these other plants get too aggressive, you just trim them back. It's really that easy. And I'd rather be choosing plants I trimmed. I've like wandered so far. There's like a podium. This always gets me in trouble at conferences. Like wander all the way out into the audience. They have to get me back. So most of us are underutilizing our growing spaces. You are underutilizing your growing spaces. There's a famous Dutch theologian by the name of Abraham Kuyper, or Kuyper, depending on how you like to pronounce it. He once said that there's not a single square inch of the entire creation that Christ does not cry out mine, making a theological claim. This should be your attitude with your garden. There should not be a single square inch of your garden that you don't cry out and claim, well, that's mine. Because if you don't claim that space in the garden, weeds will. So the second way, well, John, how do I know I'm doing this? How do I know I'm growing more right? My goal is a couple weeks after the summer solstice, I do not want to be able to see a single inch of bare space in one of our annual growing spaces. Not a single square inch. If I can have it all green, that's great. If it's not green, then it's going to be mulched. So not a single square inch of our growing spaces is going to be available, though, for something that I don't want to grow to get growing. So third and last point, start aggressively mulching. There are 3 types of mulches, categories of mulches that are really popular right now. The first one I've touched on a little bit, living mulches. Living mulches are highly underutilized by modern gardeners. If you can get used to using living mulches in your garden, it's going to revolutionize the way you grow plants. And it's going to save you tons of money over time. And it's going to do so much to build your soil. So living mulches, again, are plants you grow that live on the soil and act like a mulch, protecting it, conserving water, doing all of these other beneficial things. Second type of mulch are human mulches, plasticulture, tarps. We use sheet metal at times as a mulch, like underneath our garden fencing, because who wants to weed underneath a garden fence? So I get old pieces of sheet metal off of barn roofs that have been damaged, slice them down to the width I want, and I lay them under the garden fence. Because how many of you have ruined a deer fence with a weed whacker? There's these impermeable man-made mulches. I'm not a big fan of plasticulture, personally. And then the third type of mulch are what we call biomulches. Biomulches are hay, straw, wood chips, and similar organic materials with which you mulch your garden areas. This is like my favorite conference ever. My wife is probably worried that I'm going to be filling our van with wood chips to take home. Wood chips, if you want to get me something for Christmas, please get me a PTO-driven wood chipper. I have been looking for a good size. For like a 4-county radius in Kentucky, I think the wood chip trucks for the tree trimmers call each other when they know that I am on the road to avoid me. Because I'll be late for work before I will miss accosting a wood chip truck to ask them to come dump their chips at my farm. I absolutely adore wood chips. I don't think there is a better mulch that you can get your hands on than wood chips. If you can't get your hands on wood chips, finding good, clean straw that is not grown, sprayed to death with chemicals is our second favorite biomulch to bring in. I am not a fan of bringing hay into my garden. Anybody know why we don't like bringing hay into the garden? Because hay is full of nothing but weed seeds. And what is the goal with your garden? So nothing against Ruth Stout and all of her devotees, and I will fight you after this talk because I missed training now for like 5 straight days, so I'm itching for a little. But I'm not a big fan of hay if you're one of those hay gardeners. I think you're just long-term, you got yourself on what I call the hay treadmill. So mulch is awesome though. If you can't make your entire garden green, at the very least, make it brown. Make it brown with mulch. Put down lots of mulch. If you're doing wood chips, the biggest mistake people make with wood chip mulches is they do not age them properly. This is one reason that a lot of people, they see the Back to Eden guy, and they're like, I can just throw wood chips on my garden and everything will grow great and I'll never have to do anything hard again. And then they call me a couple months later, like, my garden died. I'm like, well, what'd you do? They're like, I poured a bunch of wood chips on it. I was like, how old were the wood chips? They're like fresh off the truck, man. It smelled like a cedar factory, like a woodworking shop. I'm like, yeah, like aromatics, acids, all of these other things your soil does not like. Now you're putting them straight into your soil, and all of those allopathic chemicals that the wood chips carry. You just dump them all on your soil, and now things aren't going to grow for a while. Welcome to reality. So if you do wood chip mulches, avoid the biggest mistake people are making because of not getting the full story. You have to age the wood chips long enough to ensure they are not going to hurt your soil or hurt your plants. And you go, John, well, how do I know that wood chips have aged long enough. We use what we call the sight and the smell test. If I can smell a pile of wood chips and tell you what kind of tree it came from, or I can look at the wood chips and tell you what kind of tree it came from, the wood chips aren't aged enough. Good. So these strategies work with just about everything you grow. We've been using these strategies now for about a decade. I outline how to use them more specifically in my book. And I just really want to thank John and Arlen for making this event possible. It's so great to be able to do a homesteading event in my own backyard where I'm originally from. I just want to thank all of you for making it possible and giving me a few minutes of your time.
Thank you, John. Okay. Are we having fun yet? All right. So, got a couple of small announcements. You have this book, okay? Unlike the Word of God, it's not perfect, okay? So I want to make a couple corrections. Number one, John Moody, somehow, some way, we did not include him on the Influencer Summit Social this evening. We did make a sign last evening when we realized somehow that got missed. So thank you, John, for being here. He's going to be here tonight. And you will also notice a typo in the people that are coming up next. Humble heroes, not humble here. So this book is an enormous amount of work. I take responsibility for the errors because I was the last guy through and I missed that. That's why my company is named Superb Industries, not Perfect Industries. We're not perfect, but we try to do our best. Okay, I'm very pleased to bring the next two people up on the stage. First of all, Ken McCaw is a name you probably have not heard. He appropriately names his film company Humble Heroes Films, and he has done a lot for this summit behind the scenes. We first encountered Ken when he brought Ricky Skaggs to the very first summit that we had here. We had a benefit concert, raised $100,000 for the Kentucky flood victims, and he had a personal relationship with Ricky Skaggs and brought him right here to this tent. But nobody knew that Ken did that. The music that you enjoyed as you were coming in, including the title of what we're thematically presenting this year's Seed to Spoon, that's all Ken's work. And then, of course, we have Sarah Thrush, who is our spokesperson for the canning category. She has over 1 million followers on TikTok and other social media. She's got an announcement to make, 2 of them, so I won't steal her thunder. Please welcome to the stage Sarah Thrush and Ken McCaw.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Is it hot enough? Oh my gosh. So what I wanted to tell you today is that you guys asked about 3 years ago for a book. You asked for a canning book. You wanted canning recipes. You wanted to know how to do it. And guess what? We have the book available. It's out. So this is only available today and tomorrow here at this event. This book actually hasn't been published yet for the general public, so you can get it here, and we have a booth set up. I'm going to be doing some signings and stuff later. And then we also want to talk a little bit about some music that Ken has done.
So when you were coming in this morning, you heard some tunes you never heard. We realized a few years ago, I don't know why, but this homestead movement is huge. For some reason, there's no music, so we decided to write some for you. So we've got a CD and also a USB drive that you can put in your car. If it's a new car that doesn't have a CD player, you can put this USB drive in there. It acts just like a CD. Come to our booth. We'll show you how to do it. There's some rock and roll on here. There's some country on here. There's a couple of sweet ballads. There's some inspirational stuff. And I'm going to play a little bit of what we call the funny one.
If God wanted us to be vegetarians, he wouldn't have made cows out of meat.
We bought a farm 3 years ago to change our lives around. We got ourselves a tractor so we could plow the ground. We got some pigs and chickens and none of them were tame. But then the trouble started when Mama gave them each a name. She named the bull Sylvester cause he thinks he's big and mean. The hogs are Rick and Jenny and they're never squeaky clean. The hens are Frank and Sally and they're scared of a mouse. The sheep are Gabe and Casey and they live inside the house. We can't make no money on the farm. We can't make no money on the farm. With a duck named Lou, a cow named Sue, tell me what we're supposed to do. We can't make no money on the farm.
You gotta be kidding me.
The goats are Jim and Betty, and George and Kim and Sam. The geese are Jane and Freddie, Steve and Bob and Pam. She won't let me sell a single animal we've raised. I tell her we need money, but she will not be fazed. Now she's putting name tags on tomatoes and the beets. We're all gonna starve to death with nothing to eat. Never name the livestock, that's what they say. Cause if you name the livestock, you will surely pay. We can't make no money on the farm. We can't make no money on the farm. With a duck named Lou.
That's a true story, by the way. Come to our booth and I'll tell you about it. This is $10, cash preferred. We're in B over here, tent number B. And Sarah's got something really exciting to tell you about.
Okay, aside from spending the last 2 years writing a canning book for everybody, I also decided it would be a good time to start a documentary, because why not? Let's just do all the things at once, which is insane and I will never do again. But we have a new documentary or docu-series that we are working on right now. And it's really important work, and we're looking for like-minded individuals, what I think all of you guys are. We have a booth set up. It's called Destination Preservation. It's in the canning extravaganza tent. I'm going to be in there canning, signing books, and talking about our new docuseries. And what we'd like to show you today is just a very small teaser trailer about this and why we feel this work is important for securing our food security and our food sovereignty. So we're going to watch a little trailer for you guys. Welcome to Destination Preservation. This is a new docuseries that I'm really excited to be a part of. Let me ask you a question. What did you have for breakfast this morning? And do you know where that food came from? Most Americans today buy all of their food from a grocery store, and it comes from a commercial farm. We're very disconnected from our food in that way. In this docuseries, we are going to bridge the gap between where our food comes from and how it gets to our family's table. From the city to the farm, let's take a look at where our food comes from. Today I'm going to meet Minister Aaron of Southside Family Farms, an urban farming initiative in Columbus, Ohio.
This is our first urban farm. It was a space to engage community and to get community educated on growing. All of these beds here, we grow organically. Communicate, collaborate, and cultivate.
Yes.
And to know your story and communicate it, and to grow your story.
And to grow your food.
And to grow your food.
Because that
all starts around food.
It all starts around food because we all have to eat, right?
Yes.
So bridging that gap between our cultural heritage and where our food came from for our ancestors, and then all of their knowledge, you know, not letting that get lost.
Yes.
And that's really what you're doing here in the community, is teaching the youth and the children how to put their hands in the dirt and seed to table what that looks like.
Yes. We want to remove the blight, you know, because we said blight is not always in the houses. It's in the perception and the things you see. And so we want to bring the colors into our community. And again, those are the colors that are in our color band: resources, relationship, the reviving, and redemption. In this space here, we have started planting a lot of perennial flowers and more sensory plants. And so even when we put the lamb's ear in there,
Yeah, we call that cowboy tissue paper.
it's nice and soft. Being able to come to their community urban farm and having a space where they can do that thing together, and then they go home and share the story with their parents, who, you know, because of those generational absences, they are now learning. Now the youth are teaching the parents.
That's right. The youth build the boxes, and then they're going to do the art on the boxes, and then they're going to grow in the boxes, and then reap the benefit of everything that they're working on. So it really is beautifully interwoven between the food in the community and the youth here.
Yeah.
You've done a wonderful job.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for saying that. And it is about us, even as we are growing community and developing the community, we like to think of it as growing farmers.
You just have to teach a few people, and those people teach a few people, and it's just a spark. That's all you need.
And it starts with a seed.
That's right.
It starts with a seed,
It does
and
start
you
with
have
a
to
seed.
plant the seed, sow the seed, and
Yeah.
it will bring the harvest of what you expect. But it takes some communication, collaboration, and some cultivation.
Thank you for having me
Yes,
here
thank
today.
you for
I appreciate
coming
you so
and,
much.
opening up this opportunity.
And now we're headed to the country to meet with the Cruz family on their homestead. It is so beautiful out here.
Thank you so much for having me.
How was the drive?
Oh, it was good. It was good. Hi. Look at all you guys. Hi, how are you? It's such a beautiful family. I'm so excited to learn about your guys' farm today.
Great. We're happy to show it to you.
Show me what you got growing in your hoop house. Come on. And show me what you got in here. She's like, leave me alone. I'm eating my lunch. Ooh. Whoa, it is warm in here. What is that one?
It's lettuce.
Lettuce. All right. It is 100 degrees in here. Who does what with the chicken chores?
Me and Kinsey.
You and Kinsey. And what do you and Kinsey do? Collect the eggs? Homesteading is always a process. So what I find is people think that they're just going to start a homestead and like have all the things and everything's going to be beautiful and aesthetic, and it's not.
It's definitely a progression.
It's a progression.
And I feel like the people that start doing too much all at once end up quitting.
Yeah.
Because they get overwhelmed, they get burned out.
What type of breed are these?
So Mama is a Berkshire, 100%.
Okay.
And I bred her with a Duroc.
I wanted to thank you guys for having me here today. What is your driving force for wanting to grow your own food and have your crops and your animals and homeschool your children, and what's the why behind that?
I mean, if you want to wrap it all into one word, I would say leaving behind a legacy. You know, this life isn't wealth of money, it's wealth of the nature that God has created. Like, we are, as something else we teach the kids, like, you know, He gave us this land, He gave us these animals, that's our responsibility. He gave us this,
So your
and we are to take
faith
care of it.
is interwoven with your lifestyle.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of where the name Narrow Road comes from.
Okay.
In Matthew, the road that leads to destruction is wide and many people pass through it, but the harder road is the narrow road, but that leads to salvation and that kind of thing.
Life,
So
yeah, and like, you know, this lifestyle, it's harder. You know,
It
there's
is.
no doubt about it.
Yes.
Like,
Right, this is a work sun up, sundown, plus
After dark,
you have
too.
and you have to work outside of the home to
Yep.
bring in the income to do the things that you want to do here. It's a simpler life, but it's not an easier
yeah,
one.
simple does not mean easy in this
Right.
way.
You do your thing, and I'll just what is it called? Sous chef. I'll sous can.
I like that, soup can. Maybe that can be like a new term. You have the canner and the soup canner.
Yeah, we should probably get a patent on that. Yeah, a sous canner. You just can't do all the things.
Yes.
What's great is knowing how to do all the things, so you have the knowledge to do them.
Yeah, I think that's one of the downfalls of many people that start this lifestyle, because they have that ambition.
Sure.
And then they have to learn to let go of certain things.
Was that a child?
That was a child. Having more than 10 minutes is a miracle, honestly, which is okay. It's a lifestyle we choose.
I wanted to say thank you for having me over at your house today.
You're welcome.
And showing me all your things and teaching me all your stuff. And it was really great being here, so thank you guys so much for having me. I'm here in Ohio. I've been invited by a Korean family to come learn how to make kimchi. Kimchi is a fermented food. I don't know anything about it, but fermentation is food preservation. So I'm all in.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well, thank
It's good
you.
to meet you in person.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Nice to meet you.
So nice to meet you. Thank you so much for having me today.
Of course. Are you ready to make some kimchi?
I absolutely am ready. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Okay.
So today
You guys are gonna maybe show me how to make some kimchi. I have never done this before, so I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm just gonna take a back seat, watch you guys work your magic. Do you often make kimchi together?
Yeah, we do.
Oh, so you're probably like a well-oiled machine.
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, let's make some kimchi.
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah. We're not going to wash the cabbage right now.
Okay.
We don't wash. So we're going to make 4 different sections.
Okay.
So first, make half. Go through the knife, about, I would say, 35%. And use your hand to crack that open, like this.
Okay.
Every other layer, we're going to put the salt.
Okay, so what we're doing here is brining
Yeah.
the nap cabbage.
You guys want to try that?
Yeah? Okay. All
Okay.
right. Salt heavy at the top. And lighter at the bottom.
Very good.
Yeah. And now we're going to wash this cabbage.
Okay. Get all the brine off, basically.
Exactly.
Yep.
For today's kimchi marinade, we're using ginger, garlic, pear, green onion, fermented shrimp, salt, sugar, plum extract, fish sauce, gochugaru or red pepper flakes, and sweet rice powder.
We always try to starting with the small, and then we can adding later, especially salt.
Oh, this smells so good.
You're doing good. Yeah, don't put too much. That's good amount. Perfect. I will tell you when you put too much.
Into the jar?
Yep, into the
the
jar.
jar.
Into
I
the
think
jar.
that will be the last piece.
Yep, you really want to
And really
push
shove it down.
Shove it down there.
Your job is very busy today.
There we go. The first jar.
Yep.
Before we eat, I'm going to try to say something in Korean to you.
Say it.
잘 먹겠습니다. No?
Great.
Is it
Yeah,
right?
that's excellent.
All right.
Great job.
Thank you so much for feeding me and for all this wonderful food.
All right, let me see. I love fresh kimchi.
Do you like fresh?
I love
All
fresh
right, I'm going to
kimchi.
try the fermented.
That's the thing. Kimchi 2 days old, 17 days old, same kimchi, different taste.
Same exact recipe, same exact, you've done everything the same. Just time changes it.
Right, exactly.
Kind of like us.
Yeah.
No doubt it. Yep.
This is delicious. Thank you so much.
All right.
We believe this is important work. If you would like to invest in the success of this series, please go to our website. Coming to a kitchen near you. I couldn't even finish it. Seriously though, we're coming to your kitchen.
If you would like to know how you can be a part of this, please come to our booth. We need story ideas, we need financial backing, we need a number of things, but we would love to have your help. And this next speaker asked me to introduce him, and I've been trying to think, what can I say about John Miller that you don't already sort of know, since he's been the face of the Food Independence Summit for the last 3 years. And I thought of, in working with him over these last 3 years, we've had a number of talks, business-related, whatever we needed to deal with, and inevitably our conversation goes into something really deep, life-changing stuff, things we're going through. And the thing I've learned about John is that the man is really deep. He's a deep thinker, he's a deep believer, he's a serious student of the Bible, and he has some things he's going to share this morning that I think you're going to find very inspirational. John Miller.
Thank you, Ken. So now I'm going to have to try to live up to that, right? That's the problem with putting somebody up to introduce you. But thank you, Ken. He's been a great help, as I mentioned before, in making everything possible. And I'll just say at the outset here that one of the inspiring things for me here has been the number of people, sponsors and otherwise, that have come and have made this possible. This is an enormous endeavor if you see what goes on behind the scenes. But I want to just talk to you a little bit about something that I'm passionate about. So it's all on you. Depending on whether this is interesting to you, I can do this in 10 minutes or I can do it in an hour. So this past weekend at church, they asked me to do an offertory, and I asked how much time have I got. Is it 20 minutes? So people were wagering whether John could say anything in 20 minutes. So I'm just giving you a heads up of what you might be up against. So the topic here is the God of the garden. And this may be a little bit strange, I suppose. You talk about God and the garden, and why does homesteading, or more precisely, gardening, reflect the image of God? And as we go through this, I will show you that gardening has been very much a part of my family's life, going back generations. What I'm going to share with you, though, is something that I came to realize relatively recently. Gardening was so much a part of what we did that I never thought of it as anything special. It was just something you do because we needed the food. 2 generations back, my mom was post-World War II, she was making dresses out of feed sacks, and gardening was something that we had to do in order to have a livelihood. The reflecting the image of God is something that I've come to realize more recently, and that's why I'd like to share it with you this morning, because gardening is a lot more than just growing food. So let's start here. Isn't that a great picture? I mean, that's galactic. What descriptors would you, anybody want to shout out a descriptor? What does that picture look like? Awesome God. Anybody else? Oh, this is a tough crowd. Declares the glory of God, the heavens. Yes, ma'am. The stars were meant to worship you, so will I. You have to shout out. Okay. So this is actually a picture that I got from the James Webb telescope. They're looking farther and farther into space. And so now I'll make a disclosure. I believe that God created all the galaxies, that he created the complexities of cosmology, and more importantly, perhaps, maintains and holds it all together by the word of his power. So we have a great God when you look at that expanse. And I mean, we know just the itty-bitty amount of what there is. That's the God that I try to serve the best I can with my limited abilities. Take one more look. That same God made this. This is an iStock photo. I'll get a little bit more personal here in a minute. But this is the point. The creator of cosmology was also a gardener. And I think it tells us something about the nature of God that is worth contemplating. Men who do great things tend to become isolated and become famous and become very selfish. God created more than we will ever know, and then, after the week of creation that's described in Genesis, the first thing he did, we'll get to in a minute, is he created this garden. So this is your first takeaway. I want you to write this down. The God of the galaxies is also the God of the garden that we'll look at a little bit closer. So I'd like to, this is one scripture I'm going to quote, and then we'll go from there. This is a very familiar scripture that has two operative words. Then God said, let us make man in our image according to our likeness. And I have to add this second one. I just, kind of have to poke it. Male and female, he created them. There were only two of them, okay? I wasn't going to say this, but I'll give you a digression. See, this is what happens. So a number of years ago, we had a young lady move in with us to go through college. She came from the Army. She wanted to go to school. And then she had a dental appointment. And she said, John, they had three options: male, female, other, and not sure. And I said, well, what did you put down? And she said, well, I knew what it was. So here's my challenge to this friendly audience. If I ever go, think about this, if I ever go to a doctor and they have those options, remember, this is a scientist who's going to diagnose something. Ladies and gentlemen, I will let you all know I'm going to put on not sure. You know why? Oop, pop. You see, I'm getting in trouble. I'm getting ghosted. I'm going to put down not sure. I'm going to go into that examination room, and when Doc comes in, I'm going to say, I put down not sure. Would you please check? And if he gets it wrong, I'm out of there. Okay, that was, you can write that down too. There are two operative words in this particular passage of Scripture, and they are image and likeness. You know, I could talk about the Hebrew behind that, but I want to keep this simple. Image and likeness can be pragmatically summarized in this way. And this is a takeaway. I want you to remember this. It is the fractional capacity as human beings created in God's image to, on a fractional basis, do what God does and to be like He is. You know, jump forward into the New Testament. John wrote, we're to be like Him. Many of you will know that scripture. So, image and likeness, I'm going to summarize with this. It's the fractional capacity to do what God does and to be like He is. That's a big philosophical posture. Now let's make it practical. I want you to look at this I've got some graphics up here. I probably should have put this in the book. But it can be summarized this way. What we do determines who we become. Now, that is true negatively and positively. If you drink, you'll come to be a drunk, okay? Who we are, you know, when you come to be a drunk, who we are then determines what we do. You drink more, right? The entirety of life and doing and being can be summarized in these two words. We want to make sure it's based on truth. So question number one. Oh, this clicker's not having a mind of its own here. Let me just see if I can. Okay, what did God do? We're going to look at a couple things He did in the garden. The first thing He did after the week of creation is He planted the garden eastward in Eden. And, you know, we all know what happened. You have all the bad stuff that happened, right? That's what we tend to think about. I want to focus on the positive today. And by doing so, the God of the galaxies became the God of the garden. Think about that for a moment. You have someone, a being that has the capability to make all this great stuff, and he planted a garden. What did he do next? God made trees grow out of the ground that was good for food. That's a paraphrase of Genesis chapter 2, verse 8. But when we think about made, you think about, okay, he spoke this into existence, and obviously he could have done that. But actually, the word made here means to grow. So God did what we often do, and that is to make stuff grow, plants and trees that are good for food. Then number 3, he put man in the garden to cultivate and to keep it. It's starting to become really practical. And by the way, Luke the physician said that Adam was the son of God. So God put his child into this garden that he had planted, where there was food to be eaten. And I'll just say this, we always talk about the 2 trees, and of course they were in there, but what most people miss, I think, is the fact that, God was so generous, he let everybody eat from all the trees of the garden except one. It's just one. How many gardeners do we have here that would be that generous? Just invite the whole community in and you go ahead and eat everything. So here's what I think we miss, and this is what I missed. And we're going to look at some pictures here in a minute. He put his son Adam into the garden to do on a fractional basis what God had already done. To cultivate it, to keep it, to grow it, to provide food for his family, so on and so forth. So here's the personal side. Anybody want to guess who that is? Oh, that's back when I had hair. And they were a different color. That picture was taken by someone in the family 40 years ago. And I'm out in what is now my brother's orchard. Is there some prophecy somewhere in the Bible that says, you shall plant and others shall eat the fruit thereof? I've done that, So that was me 40 years ago, grafting a couple of different species of apples onto the apple tree. That, a couple weeks ago, I went back over there. The tree's still there 40 years later. That's my brother, Dan, who owns the piece of land we were living on. And that's the tree today, 40 years later. Now, I remember I had a hat. I took my hat off just to change out the scenery. So I had a friend of mine who came up to me, John, you really shouldn't wear that hat. I said, why? He said, well, you don't wear it. I've never seen you with a hat. And I said, well, that's because you only know a very little part of my life. I wear a hat a lot of times. So we also had a vineyard, and back then I was working with a soil agronomist in Leamington, Ontario, that had some really practical ideas. Underneath that vine, he had me bury 2 5-gallon pails. I dug a hole 3 feet deep and put in 2 5-gallon pails of high magnesium limestone. And to the right, you see what that thing looks like 40 years later. Now this, when Ricky Skaggs was here a couple of years ago, so how many were here for the concert with Ricky Skaggs? Actually, just a handful. That was the evening event. He said I married up, okay? This is my wife, Susan, and my son and daughter. He's 40 years old now and runs our company, was here earlier this morning. So we had a patio garden before patio gardens were a thing. And then this, this is why, this is the real thing, you know. You only have kids so you can have grandkids, right? So this is, and Caleb's back here somewhere. Where are you, Caleb? There he is. I'm sorry, Caleb, when I put this together, I couldn't find a picture of you pushing the tiller in our garden, but I think that one on the left, isn't she cute? I'm just being a little bit biased. She's the cutest little thing, and she'll be here later today, but she's helping Grandma water the garden. So as I mentioned, this was just, there I am in the pear tree, and we've got raspberries and pears, which probably have some things that Neal Kinsey could help me out on, because, I mean, they've got some brown stuff. They're Bartlett pears, so we don't spray them, so it's whatever we get. Here's what I didn't get. When we plant a garden, when you plant a garden, when we grow trees and plants for food, when we put our children in the garden to cultivate, it reflects the image of God, because you are doing, we are doing what God did, even though at a fractional capacity. It's about more than growing food. It's about reflecting the very image of the Creator. I have one last thought. Fourth thing God did, and this is normally, and it is in the context of the fall and Adam and Eve making their own choice, but it reflects back on what was happening in the garden prior to that. God first walked and talked with man in the garden in the evening. And again, I've been reflecting on this. He didn't meet them at some high place, some big shrine, or some sophisticated place. God created man, put him in a garden, told him to cultivate it, and then he came and walked and talked. That makes an enormous statement about the essence and being of God. So, I've got to put my grandkids up there one more time. But when you plant your garden next spring, this fall, remember that you are doing on a fractional basis what God did with man at the very creation. Remember that it is about building relationships in a space that is natural, that you can interact with. I've never known a kid that doesn't like to get down into the dirt. It doesn't matter how much technology we have, the kids go in and maybe terrify their mom because they come out with dirt all over. But they're cultivating. And that's what God commanded the first man to do when he put him into that beautiful garden. So as you go through this afternoon and you look at all the different options and how you can make things better, just remember this. God is the God of the garden, and when you do what he did, you're reflecting the image of God. Hat back on. You see, what some people may not know, we lived in Texas for 4 years, so I can put on a southern drawl if you ask me. And then we moved to Germany, which ironically, I don't think Neal knows this, I first heard about Neal Kinsey in Germany. I knew a man with what you would think is a funny name, His name is Ernst Herzogenrath. Try saying that. And he was a very successful farmer, and he introduced me, introduced me to this great agronomist that had helped him solve some soil problems. So Neal Kinsey is founder and president of Kinsey Agricultural Services. We brought him in here from Missouri, and he's going to be talking about nutrient needs for soils and plants in your garden. And moreover, he's going to be back on this stage at 2 o'clock this afternoon, and he has the whole afternoon to solve problems. So if you have soil and nutrient needs in your garden, come back in here at 2 o'clock, and you'll be able to go through the workshop with him. So he's also the oldest in a family of 12, a family from southeastern Missouri. And I asked him, okay, Neal, what don't people know? He's a rock star. He was in high school and started a rock and roll band. Please welcome to the stage Mr. Neal Kinsey.
Well, good morning, everyone. I hope. Yep. Soil fertility for growing in gardens, greenhouses, orchards, and landscaped areas. Some people think all those are different. What we really find is when you have your soil right, it works for all those. The thing that I'll say is we do thousands of samples from all over the world, 80 different countries, and many of those are gardens. Some are conventional, some are organic. About 2/3 of our work is with conventional growers and about 1/3 with certified organic growers, and some of those are both. Of all the gardens we receive, I do well if I see one a month that we say, this garden is such fertile soil, there's nothing you could do to improve it. Am I saying everything's wrong with gardens? No. All I'm saying is there is so much more to growing a crop than just saying, let's plant it, and if it grows, it's going to be good. If it grows, it's going to be better than not growing. But when I first started, we started with growers. We said, we specialize in problem soils. And for the first 5 years, most of the soils we worked with were problems that someone said, this is just not growing right. But you know what we found? Even after you get a soil where it can grow something that looks good, that doesn't always mean it is good. The man who taught me, Dr. William Albrecht, had made a movie in the 1940s called The Other Side of the Fence. And he held up 2 carrots. They looked the same. He said, this carrot really doesn't have any nutritive value in it at all. And this carrot is a very nutritional thing to eat. Both of them look the same. Just because we look at something and it looks good does not mean that's what we need. Soil fertility for better landscapes. I put that in there because a lot of people think, well, you know, flowers and shrubs and trees are different than vegetables. As far as the fertility that's required, I don't know of a plant in the world. And we work with all different types of plants from the tropics to the frigid parts of the poles. Anything will grow wherever. And you know what? If you get the soil right, every one of those plants do their best. And it's not a matter of it's got to be exact, but there are parameters that you have to meet. You can't have less than this, you can't have more than this, or it's going to affect something else. Same thing holds true with flowers as it does with vegetables. Today we're going to concentrate more on the vegetable portion of it. There. No matter how many or how different, the soils and the crops on your land may be, the laws of science still work the same for all of them. By that I mean, whether we're in Australia or whether we're in Africa or whether we're in the US, the law of gravity still works the same. So does every law of chemistry, so does every law of physics, so does every law of biology. And those are the three things that we are most concerned about. Anywhere in the world, the laws of science are the same. As long as we do it using something that we can measure, something that we can get the same answer wherever we are. So when we're looking at soil to grow bananas in Africa, we use the same principles that we do with soil growing bananas in Central America. We use the same principles that we do for growing apples here in Ohio, or for growing carrots, or for growing whatever else you may be wanting to grow. Now, in this short time, there are a lot of things that could be said, but I'm just going to concentrate and I'll be sort of jumping around. But for those of you in the audience, if you have a garden, do you have problems getting enough blooms on your vegetables and flowering plants? Now, this is just a tip. This has nothing to do with the soil side of it, because we'll have clients that will do what they're supposed to do as close as they can, and they'll call up and say, I've got these tomatoes. They look great, but they don't have any blooms on them. If you're having trouble getting blooms, just take a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar, sorry, not a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, 1 tablespoon, put it in a gallon of water. Pour that in a pump-up sprayer and just mist it on your tomatoes or whatever else you're having trouble getting blooms on. If it's a flower, whatever it may be. Just mist it. Don't wet it down so that it drips. Just get a mist on it. Just wait about 3 days. And all of a sudden, those plants start blooming because we're supplying some nutrients they need that they're not getting somehow. But a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar in a gallon of water will actually help put more blooms on tomatoes or whatever else. If you say, I got blooms on there, but they're dropping off, they're not forming fruit. Well, then if you get plenty of blooms but you don't get fruit, put a tablespoon of household ammonia, the same ammonia you use to clean your windows with in the house. Tablespoon of household ammonia in a gallon of water, and mist it on your plants. Just see if it doesn't start setting those fruits. Some people get plenty of blooms, they just don't get fruit. Some people don't get enough blooms. Once they get the blooms, fruit's fine. Some people don't get the blooms, still don't get enough fruit, so they have to do both. That's something that can help. Does that solve the problem? Well, it solves the immediate problem, but you're going to have it keep coming back and keep coming back until we find out what it is that needs to be done. So that what we want to do is look at the soil and solve the problem so that we don't have to keep doing it over and over and over every year. We look at fertility in that way because that's what makes a difference. That makes a big difference in terms of the things that happen. And what are we looking for? Producing good, nutritious food should be the chief and immediate short-term goal. Growers should consider this first to keep going. And good plant health is a key here. Good plant health doesn't just come just because we plant it and then go out there and hold the weeds out or put the mulch around or whatever it may be. Good plant health has more to, there's more to good plant health than that. And that is, we have to have the right nutrients there in order to solve the problem. If we have a problem, there's something wrong. And if there's something wrong, what is it that we have to do to make it right? Here's a big problem, though. If you've got a garden and it's all the same soil, well, then that becomes easy. But if you've got a garden and part of it over here goes one way and part over here goes another way, part of it's a red soil, part of it's a black soil, part of it's a brown soil or a gray soil or whatever it may be, if you analyze those soils, they're a different color because they have a different makeup. If you have a part of the garden that grows more of one type of grass or weed than the rest of it, it's there because it has a different nutrient makeup. The question is it large enough for you to say, I'll take care of it separately? I'll find out what it is, what it needs, and I'll put it on that part, but not necessarily on the rest of the garden. Some people say, I just want to grow plants. If that's what you want to do, then that can be done easily. But if you want to grow plants that have the very highest nutrient-dense nutrition, You have to get the nutrients right in the soil in the first place. Because every time you have a soil that has too much of one thing, it will not have enough of something else. You can't get a soil that has too much of everything. Everything you put on your soil affects it either positively or negatively. We're just going to hit on a few places here, but what can safely be done? No poisons needed to keep insects from chewing holes in the leaves of your small green bean plants and keep them for the whole season. When you plant a green bean in your garden, it comes up like that, just watch and see when does something start chewing holes in the leaf. When you see the first holes come in that leaf, it's time for you to do something. And I'm going to tell you that what's happening is that bean is not getting enough magnesium. It's not getting enough magnesium. And what will happen if you go in there and if you wanted to spend the money and take enough of those plants and send them off, what would happen is that bean would come back and show you that, well, this plant is deficient in magnesium. And the key is magnesium only becomes available to plants in one narrow amount in every soil. If you have less than 10% of the nutrient holding capacity of your soil is less than 10% is magnesium, you're going to get holes in your green bean leaves. But on a clay soil, if it's more than 12%, you're still going to get holes in the green bean leaves, because if you have less than 10, you have a magnesium deficiency, and if you have more than 12, because a soil that has too much magnesium will not get enough. And guess what? In Ohio, most of the soils we have don't have magnesium deficiency. If you've got light sands, maybe so. But most soils have a magnesium excess, above 12%. So I could say probably most of your gardens, now you can go out there and spray the beans and so forth. I don't like to spray anything. I want to grow everything as natural as possible. So when I watch my green bean leaves, and yes, I get holes chewed in the green leaves in my garden, because the garden we had for 40 years was at another house. We built a new home, moved 30 minutes away, moved from sand to heavy clay. And that heavy clay still has too much magnesium. We've lived there 9 years, and I'm still working on it. But the insects start chewing in the leaf. What you do is take a tablespoon of Epsom salts. 1 tablespoon of Epsom salt. Same thing you use to soak your feet in, or some put it in their bath water or whatever. 11% magnesium sulfate. You can buy it at the drugstore. Take that Epsom salt, put a tablespoon in a gallon of water, put it in a pump-up sprayer, and go mist the leaves. And whatever's chewing holes in those leaves will quit for about 3 to 4 weeks. Just watch the beans. And when they start chewing holes in those beans again, do it again. You might have to do it every 3 or 4 weeks, because it's just showing that bean's still not getting enough magnesium. One of the biggest problems we have in terms of food crops, not necessarily reported that way, but one of the biggest problems we have is getting enough magnesium into our food. And when you talk to a heart specialist, what they'll tell you is that's one of the biggest problems we have for our heart. We're not getting enough magnesium. What's one of the biggest killers in the U.S.? Heart disease. Is it because we're not putting the magnesium where it needs to be? We're not even checking necessarily for the foods that come out of the stores and so forth. Nobody cares, because you know what? Most people will tell you, involved in agriculture, magnesium doesn't make any difference at all. If all you're looking to do is go bulk, maybe not. But if you're looking to go quality, yes it does. So tip for insect control: foliar magnesium on your garden plants. Mix 1 tablespoon of Epsom salts per gallon of water and mist it on the leaves every 3 to 4 weeks. If it works for you, don't say, oh boy, that's great, I'm going to do it every week. Because if you do, that's too much. And it'll actually start drying those plants out. You won't get, even though you may have enough water, it'll begin to dry those plants every 3 to 4 weeks. And even then, if you're a big producer, run some tests and see, well, do I have enough magnesium or not? But if you're a gardener, easier to do this. Just watch for the holes in the leaves. When you spray those green beans, I sprayed my 2 rows of green beans and had a whole lot left. So I thought, well, I'll just spray the cucumbers and the corn and basically I sprayed the whole thing in a small home garden. You know what? In 3 days, you could tell it. Because everything turned greener. It looked green, it looked like, well, everything looks good. But in 3 days' time, everything turned greener. Why is that? Because magnesium is the center of chlorophyll, and the nitrogen has to attach around it. And until we get enough magnesium there, we can't use the nitrogen to keep those plants as green as they should be to build chlorophyll. We're feeding the plants, we're feeding ourselves. If you're looking at sweet corn, growing sweet corn, same is true for silage corn, for popcorn, for any type of corn for grain. But when you start looking at the corn, go out there just before that corn tassels, or you can, if you're there before, that's fine. But just before the corn tassel, and look at the leaves on that stalk. And if the bottom leaf has a yellow V shape in it, that means that leaf is deficient in nitrogen. But as that nitrogen doesn't move in that plant, you have to get new nitrogen in to keep it green. So, nitrogen does move in the plant, and it pulls that out of the old leaves on into the newer ones. And so if we don't keep enough nitrogen there, the plant keeps pulling it away from the older leaves. But for every leaf that you see that has a yellow V in the tip, that means you didn't put on enough nitrogen, and that will be depending on where your magnesium level is. If it's between 10 and 12%, that means it takes 10 pounds of nitrogen for every one of those leaves. If the magnesium is below 10%, it takes 15 pounds of nitrogen for every one of those leaves that show yellow. You walk in there and add that up. Now, if you're raising sweet corn, and you can keep the leaf where the ear is green, all those leaves below it feed the stalk. So you're still getting enough nitrogen to that sweet corn, but if you're trying to grow silage corn or popcorn or corn for grain, then what will happen is you'll start robbing the nutritional value from that grain as it matures. So once the nitrogen gets to the ear leaf, then it starts affecting how much starch is going to be put in that corn, how big the kernels will be. Potassium deficiency looks much the same as a nitrogen deficiency, except they both start in the oldest leaves, but the potassium deficiency begins right up against the stalk and will start on the outside of the leaf and move in, just like you're seeing there. It'll all turn brown from the stalk all the way out to the end. And as that leaf dies and then another dies, the more leaves die, the more that means you're short on potassium in that soil. So it's good to go out there and look, be sure, is it dying from the outside in or is it dying from the tip of the leaf back? From the tip of the leaf back is nitrogen shortage. Outside in is potassium. Many people that we talk to, even farmers, look at their corn and say, oh, we got a nitrogen deficiency, when actually they need more potassium. And like right now, when you're growing a garden or whatever, and it's getting extra dry, the first key to water uptake into a plant, once you have the minimum of everything else, potassium is the key to water use for a plant. The better your potassium levels are in that soil, in terms of what's needed, the better that potassium level is, the better you'll be able to have the plants take up water. But potassium doesn't do it by itself. It also takes zinc. So first thing we want is to have at least 2% potassium, 5% is better. If you're growing woody crops, 7.5%. We're talking percent of what? Percent of the nutrient holding capacity of that soil. The only way you know that is to measure the electrical charge, the amount of negative charge in that soil. That can be done by a soil test that expresses those in percentages. It'll tell you what your nutrient holding capacity and what percent of that capacity has potassium. We need at least 2%. If you're less than 2, you're always going to be deficient in whatever you're growing there. We see many soils that are less than 2% potassium. If you're using compost and manure, that's not general. We're going to talk about compost and manures in either today or tomorrow. I've forgotten which is this afternoon. But potassium is the first key to good water use, and zinc is the second. Because zinc is necessary for moisture absorption into the plant. As far as potassium gives you bulk. It actually, once everything else is there, and we have ideal potassium, that's when you actually get the ideal starch in a potato or whatever it may be that we're trying to grow there. looking at potatoes or looking at corn, it takes that potassium in order to build the carbohydrate in the plant. Now, that's not by itself. What we need, first of all, we need enough calcium in the leaf. Calcium puts enough calcium to put the starch in the leaf. We need enough calcium to get the starch into the leaf, and then once we get the starch into the leaf, we have to have boron to move the starch out of the leaf into the fruit or the grain. So a potato is not just going to grow a good potato just by having enough potassium there. We have to have adequate calcium there, and we have to have adequate boron there. How do you get red color? If you're raising beets and they don't have a real pretty red color, or if you're raising tomatoes, they don't have a pretty red color, or even apples or grapes, one of the biggest keys to a red color in a plant is enough potassium. Now, that's not the only key, but most of the people that we're going to be talking to here don't have the second part, because if you have good potassium level and less than 0.5% sodium in the soil, you still won't get good red color. But looking at these, let's talk about tomatoes. I think that's next here. Yeah, right here. If you have tomatoes, you go out in your garden and cut them, and they've got all that white looking and on the right-hand side. If they don't look like those red ones on the other, then that's a sure potassium deficiency. Once you get your potassium there, if you have less than 0.5% sodium, then you won't necessarily still get all that deep red color, but you will get the size because the potassium actually makes the fruit bigger. Whether vegetables or flowers, what helps plants that grow roots or bulbs or tubers? What helps them grow best? It's something most people in the eastern part of the U.S. don't pay any attention to. Now, maybe you do. But in the eastern part of the U.S., we have a tremendous amount of emphasis on phosphate in the soil, and we see many soils that have extremes in terms of phosphate. But the other part that we have to have when we have an extreme of phosphate is phosphorus is antagonistic to sulfur. And used to, we got plenty of sulfur when we burned high sulfur coal, and there was sulfur in all the fuels and so on and so forth. But you know what? All that's been taken out because everybody thinks, oh, sulfur's bad. We had acid rain, we had this, we had that. Plants need sulfur. They just don't need too much. And sulfur is the key to better root systems, better tubers, well, whether you look at bulbs or tubers, so if we don't have enough sulfur, it will actually reduce the ability of a plant to grow a root system by about 1/3. You can get about 50% more root growth by just having adequate amounts of sulfur. Now, I can tell you in your garden, I can tell you right now that even if you put sulfur on every year, unless you have a compaction layer, or unless you're putting on huge amounts, that sulfur's going to be gone. If you're putting, say, and there are people that will tell you, you can't put sulfur on your garden, that'll kill your garden. Well, we put basically between 50 and 100 pounds of sulfur per year on our garden, per acre, on a per acre basis. I keep a note here just to tell you. 100 pounds per acre of sulfur will generally show up. They don't report it in pounds per acre. Sulfur generally reported as parts per million. So 100 pounds per acre adds 50 parts per million to your soil, which is the low side of excellent. That means that if you have a 1,000 square foot garden, that means you need 2.3 pounds of sulfur per 1,000 square feet. Elemental sulfur, you can buy it at the fertilizer store. You can buy sulfur at the druggist, you know, if you just have a little bitty spot. But the sulfur at the druggist costs a whole lot more money than going out and buying it at the fertilizer store. But that works out at 3.7 ounces per 100 square feet. So if you got a small area that's a flower garden or something, 4 ounces, really 4 ounces is not too much. 4 ounces just gets you a little bit above that minimum. If you put that on every year and your soil has good drainage so that the water can move through, you're not going to overdo it. But what you'll find is it'll give you 1/3 more root system. It'll give you larger bulbs if you're growing tulips or if you're growing iris or whatever it may be, garlic, onions, any one of those. But there's one other thing. If you're growing tree crops, as long as you keep that sulfur above 50 parts per million, it'll add 25% more trunk growth per year by caliper measurement. You can measure it. It's there. We need sulfur unless you're in an area where you're getting sulfur from something that generally we don't see it anymore. You can measure it. If the soil test shows less than 50 parts per million, then we recommend our client whatever it takes to get up above that 50 parts per million they put on there. If you're growing onions or garlic, do they seemingly make nice green blades but only small bulbs? Time after time, what we find there is adding that sulfur, all of a sudden they say, we got great big bulbs. Need the sulfur to grow what grows underneath. Now, we need sulfur to grow big bulbs, but we also need something else, and that is it's needed in very small amounts, but boron fills the fruit or the grain. If you're growing apples and you always get really small fruits, I had an apple grower in Michigan, had Jonathan apples, and he said he'd grown for 20 years, and we told him, your fruit comes out small because you don't have enough boron. He said, that's the only problem we've had for all these years. We can't get big enough apples. As soon as he put the boron on, he had enough of everything else. When he put that boron on, his fruit got bigger. Why? Because boron takes the starch out of the leaf and puts it in the fruit of the grain. So, in terms of boron, I've had more people kill their plants with boron than any other thing I'm mentioning. And why? Because they didn't follow the instructions. Because they made a mistake, and when we said, well, this is how much you put on, they put on 2, 3, 4 times, sometimes 10 times too much. A good application of boron, and you can get boron as two ways. You can get boron as a soluble, which will liquefy, and you can spray in a sprayer. Now, what you want to do if you're going to use that, though, that's 20% boron, and that means you put on 10 pounds of it to the acre, and you've got 2 pounds of boron. Well, 2 pounds of boron works great sprayed on the soil. Just as long as you don't overdo that, you're not going to get into any trouble. But if you make a mistake and put 3 or 4, legumes are sensitive to boron when they're in the seedling stage. Until they get the first set of 3 leaves on, they'll just suck it up and kill them. So you can actually put a small amount of boron on your garden and cause a problem with the legumes like peas and beans, so forth, germinating. If you don't put any more than on 100 square feet, 20 pounds per acre is 3/4 of an ounce. And so 20 pounds per acre at 3/4 of an ounce, that means that if we're going to work that out on 100 square feet, then we need 0.7½ ounces per 100 square feet. Now, I'm just telling you these things to say, why is boron and sulfur, why is it that we can take a look at those and say, well, that's something to be concerned about? Because they don't stay in the soil, they leach through. Just like nitrate, nitrogen, borate, boron, and sulfate, sulfur will leach through the soil. You have to work on that year after year after year in order to be sure you have enough there. It's not something that stays, if it stays around, you got another problem because there's a compaction layer somewhere, because if the water can move through, the boron and the sulfur will move through as well, just like the nitrogen will. Not as fast, but it will move through. If you're growing sweet corn, another way to tell if you have enough boron. There will be people that tell you all kinds of things, but time and time again throughout the world we find this be the same thing. And that is, if you are growing sweet corn or field corn or popcorn and the kernels don't fill all the way out to the end, this almost filled to the end, but if it fills all the way to the end, generally there'll be a kernel right on the tip. And the further down that goes without the kernels filling, sometimes you'll see a sweet corn and that much of it just doesn't have any kernels in it. The kernels should have been there, but what we did was we had one of two things. Well, three things. The first one we don't generally see in your gardens in Ohio, and that is most of Ohio keep their calcium levels good. You have to have enough calcium in order to get the boron in. And if you have a soil that's severely deficient in calcium, the lower the calcium saturation in the soil, the more toxic boron becomes. So on very low calcium soil, we don't even recommend boron. But once we get the calcium up there, the next thing is you have to have just enough phosphorus. And if you're using compost and manure, you're generally going to have enough phosphorus. Sometimes too much, which is a different story. We won't talk about that now. But with adequate phosphorus, you can tell on your sweet corn, because when you pull the shuck down, if you've got good phosphorus, the rows will be nice and straight. If you've got straight rows, but there's a kink in it somewhere, you cut some roots. Because that kink actually made the row move over or go to the side or whatever, that affected your phosphate uptake. But if you've got good straight rows, that means you got enough phosphate. But if they don't fill all the way out to the end, and you've got good straight rows, that means you don't have enough boron. And in general, it takes 0.8 parts per million boron, and that works just about on anybody's boron test. Some tests that we have, others don't show that much. Others don't show as close. But on boron, 0.8 parts per million, you should get that to fill all the way to the end. But you know what most soils have? 0.4, 0.6. Most soils don't have a 0.8. Ideal is 1.5 to 2. And on medium to light soil, it gets hard to ever get it there. But boron fights rust and fungus diseases once you can get it up to 1.5 parts per million or higher. Now, you have to be careful about doing that, but it can be done. When to take a soil sample? Well, when you start looking at sampling and so forth, first of all, take your sample so that there's plenty of time to treat your soil in case it needs something that takes time to break down. A lot of people don't realize that when we tell a farmer or a gardener to put on limestone, when you put limestone on your soil, it's going to take at least 12 months for that calcium in the lime to become available to be able to be used by whatever you're growing there. Now, it's not saying that if you put it on right at the time you plant, that it's not going to help. But calcium is designed to do more than feed the plant. If all we're trying to do is feed plants and guess what the plant needs, we're going to get in trouble. I mean, this is what most people are taught. You don't need to worry about the soil. When I learned under Dr. William Albrecht in the 1960s, late 60s, the one thing that he was saying is, you know, agriculture today is telling, don't worry about the soil, it's just there to hold the plant up. The soil just to hold the plant up. We'll tell you how much fertilizer to put on, what you need to grow this crop. And today, most agriculture is what you need to do to feed the plant. And I don't know anybody that can guess what they need to do to feed the plant, except they say, it doesn't matter. If we just get the bulk there, that's what we're looking for. Tonnage. That's not what we're looking for if we're going it to eat. We're looking for nutritional values. Well, in terms of calcium, calcium doesn't just, when we put limestone on, the principal thing that's in most limestone, I don't know of any limestone that wouldn't have this as a principle, is calcium. We need calcium to take every other nutrient into the plant. You have to have calcium in the soil solution around the plant roots. At least 60% of that solution should be calcium. And if you have less than that, you don't get the right amount of nutrients in. It takes more and more nutrients to get the same response. But once you get that calcium on there and say, okay, it takes calcium to get in the phosphorus, the potassium, the nitrogen, everything else. Calcium doesn't get itself in. Calcium opens the door. It's like the doorman, or as Dr. William Albrecht used to say, calcium opens the door, or all the other elements go over the back of the calcium ion to get into the plant. but they go over the back. He said it's like leapfrog. It's not like that the calcium has to carry it in. The calcium stays outside and opens the door. But he said calcium can't open the door for itself. Something else has to get the calcium in. And we can have soil, you can have soil right in your garden that has really good calcium levels and still have a calcium deficiency in what you're growing there. Because if you don't have enough boron, boron is the only thing that takes the calcium into the plant. Most soils are deficient in boron, so it's not as easy as we might think to keep, even though we've got good calcium levels, to make sure we've got good calcium in our crops. But let's say we don't have a problem. We've got the boron, we've got the calcium. We need calcium for something more than that. Calcium has a job in the soil that is not just to feed the plant. Calcium is the key to soil structure. And calcium, when you put it on the soil, will actually cause that soil, the porosity of that soil to open up, and it'll make bigger pore space so that the water can move in more easily, but so can the air. Air and water get into the soil more easily. Calcium's job, if you've got a pond or a lake, and it always stays muddy. You get a rain, it stays muddy for a week, or it stays muddy, never clears up, or it stays muddy for 2 or 3 days. The ones that stay muddy for 2 or 3 days and finally clear up, probably wouldn't worry about. But I can tell you there's a line when I fly from St. Louis, Missouri to Phoenix, Arizona, and you can look out on the north side of the plain if you just happen to be going just right, and you can see ponds down there, and the ones to the south are muddy, and the ones to the north are clear. There's a line right down through there. The one side clear, the other side muddy, from the same amount of rain, same period of time. Why is that? The ones that stay muddy, those soils don't have enough calcium. The ones that clear up, those soils have so much calcium that when the soil washes into the pond, there's enough calcium to cause those clay particles. And this is what calcium does. It'll cause the clay particles to gather up or clump up and flocculate and settle to the bottom. So when we have enough calcium, it'll actually clear water up. They use calcium in water treatment plants to clear up the water. If we don't have enough calcium, then the question is how much does it take in order to get that to happen? But magnesium and potassium and sodium do the opposite. They spread clay particles apart and they make the soil tighter. Calcium loosens the soil. Magnesium, potassium, and sodium tighten the soil. So it's important to get those in the right proportions in a soil, otherwise we don't have enough pore space for the air and water that we need. And what is it that gives the health to the soil? The living organisms, the plant roots and so forth. Well, that's exactly what we've got to be concerned about. We've got to get the air and water right in the soil, or else the microbes are not going to be right either. We'll talk about that more later. I've still got a minute and a half, but I wanted to have just a little bit of time to tell you what gave me confidence in this program. And that is, when I first started, I just had to take Dr. Albrecht's word for this, but so many people said, that's too complicated. You don't need to know all that stuff. Farmers, all you need to know, or gardener, all you need to know is the simple stuff. Just pH and phosphorus and potassium, you can grow a good garden. And you know what? Most people can. But I met a medical doctor in California. He was a medical doctor. But from age 55 to age 72, he said, I've never recommended a drug for any disease. And he said, you can cure any disease without drugs if you have the right nutrition. And the first thing he insisted when anyone came to him was, if you're going to be treated by me, you need to address getting naturally grown or organically grown foods, not foods that have been poisoned and so forth. He said, you got to get good quality food or we can't solve this problem. The reason he had me come, he and his wife had a PhD in microbiology, and they grew their own food in their backyard in Sherman Oaks, California. And when I went to see him, and he had one part of the garden, great looking plant. He had another part of the garden, when they planted anything there, it died. And he said, why can't I grow something here? When we explained it to him, he said, what you and I need, that's exactly what everyone needs. So I'm over. I thought I was ready, but it looks like I'm 16 seconds over. I'm going to stop right there, and I'll tell you the rest of the story on stage later on. Thanks very much.
Hello again. So let's give all our speakers one more round of applause. We have some announcements, so don't leave just yet, okay? So I'm going to introduce now the man that makes all this work, Marcus Wengerd. He's an amazing friend of mine, owner of the campground in Carlisle Printing. So he's put an enormous amount of resources into this, and I especially want to thank him this year because right before I was in a clinic in Germany for 4 weeks in May, just got back 2 weeks ago, and so I basically dropped on him because I got sick. So I wanted to thank him very much for that. Please welcome Marcus Wengerd.
Thank you very much. I'm extremely grateful for all of you that came out today. I thought it might be yesterday when we were preparing. I don't know that I've been that warm in a long time. It was nice and warm. You know, listening to Neal, I have a real interest in soil, and I've learned a lot about soil in the last little while. And I don't think Neal knows how much he knows. Maybe someday I'll be in his shoes. So I want to say thank you to John. I was just a little bit apprehensive about the summit with John being in Germany 2-3 weeks prior to the event here. So I'm really glad that he is back and it looks like his body is in full recovery. We're grateful for that. I want to recognize our sponsors. You'll see them on the right and on the left, our gold sponsors. Make sure you pay attention to the things they have to offer. They were very generous in their giving, and without them, an event like this would be nearly impossible. So thanks to them for their kind gifts. Just a few announcements before lunch. We have some of you already have your networking name tags. If you don't have networking name tags, they are over here on the table to our right, the back corner here. The purpose for the networking name tags is for you to write your name on the name tag if you care to, and then we at the top of the name tag, I can't remember which one is at the top, but at the top it says interests, and in the middle it says experiences or experience in or expertise in. I'm not sure what word we used. But then we have labels to put on the name tags, and the purpose for that is so that if you have interests, another person, looks at your name tag and sees you have interest in a certain area, and they'll interrupt you or you'll interrupt them, and you'll get to know each other. Because I think one of the greatest things in our community here is that we all work together, and we aren't afraid to share our name and share our expertise. So participate in that if you wish. You don't have to if you don't want to. The next thing is the Summit Social. Tonight we have just a relaxed evening. We'll have some barbecue chicken and some more food, and then each one of the speakers or social media influencers that you see on the signs here on the back and on the west side of the tent will be here, and you can shake their hand, ask them questions. Just a relaxed evening of getting to know each other. And the networking name cards will be important tonight as well. So I want to thank our community. I think our community here in Holmes County, Ohio, is an amazing community to be born and raised in. If you haven't spent time roaming the back roads, you probably should. If you haven't spent time looking for the small shop on the corner that serves or that makes something that nobody else makes within 100 miles, you should make sure you explore our community here. one thing that I'd like to announce, Berlin Seeds has a microbial brew on a flatbed trailer down here, and we have enough for, I think we have enough for everyone to take a gallon along home. So you fill your own gallon of microbial brew, and we have a little label that you can put on the brew that tells you what the contents are and how to feed the microbial brew to keep it alive. I'm still learning in the world of soil, and but I'm committed to improving soil one garden at a time, and I think microbes and Wind River microbes, they're here, they have a booth here. I think microbes are an incredible part of soil health. So we brewed up about 2,000 gallons of microbial brew, and we have a gallon for everyone, along with a note or along with a label that tells you what's in it and how to keep it alive, a little bit like sourdough. It needs sugar and air and to keep the microbes alive. Do I know whether the microbial brew will be perfect for you and perfect for your garden? No, I don't. You're part of an experiment. We want to give you this gallon, and then if you use it, if you have terrible results or no results, I want to know. If you have wonderful results, I would like to know. If you don't want to tell us and you just want to share it with a friend and keep it alive for the next little while, go ahead and do that as well. So we have a lunch prepared. Lunch, I'm always excited to have lunch here. Byler's Barbecue is preparing the lunch. It looks like some are already participating. So why don't we bow our heads for a prayer before we have lunch, and then we'll dismiss for lunch. Father in heaven, thank you for this beautiful day. Thanks for your creation. Thank you for creating such a place for us to live and enjoy. Help us to get to know each other, to share with each other, and bring honor and glory to you, and bring honor and glory to each other. Thank you so much for your love and your forgiveness, and we pray your blessing on the food and on the hands that have prepared it. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. One more announcement. If you don't have a teal wristband, you should not stand in the lunch line. You'll plug the lunch line up if you don't have a teal wristband. If you don't have a teal wristband, come over here to the networking booth area, and we can either sell you one maybe, or we're running close to having our capacity for lunch. But if you bought lunch and you don't have a wristband, see us at the networking booth over here, and we'll make sure you have one before you head into the line. Our goal is to make the line move swiftly. So as you head up there, if you're in front of the line, we have 8 lines. So we can move a lot of people through if you just move right on ahead. Test. If you didn't buy the lunch feast, we do have 2 food trucks. The one is straight ahead of us, ahead of me here, and the other one is down, I think, in front of just to the right of tent B. Mission Cafe is serving lunch wraps, or wraps of sorts.